teacher noticed a 7-year-old girl hiding her lunch every day in her backpack when she secretly followed her outside during break. What she saw behind the school made her call 911 immediately. The school bell chimed across the playground of Oakwood Elementary, its familiar ring signaling the end of another lunch period. Ms. Rebecca Collins stood by the classroom door, watching her second-grade students file back in from the cafeteria with the lingering scent of chocolate milk and peanut butter sandwiches trailing behind them. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she counted heads. 19, 20, 21. One missing. Lily Parker. Again. Rebecca glanced at her watch. This was the third time this week that Lily had failed to return with the others. The previous occasions, Rebecca had found her in the library, claiming she'd lost track of time while reading. But Rebecca knew better. The librarian had confirmed that Lily hadn't been there yesterday. "Katie, would you please lead the class in silent reading until I return?" Rebecca asked her classroom helper, a responsible girl with tortoiseshell glasses who beamed at the responsibility. "Yes, Miss Collins," Katie replied with the enthusiasm only an 8-year-old granted temporary authority could muster. Rebecca stepped into the hallway, her sensible navy flats tapping against the polished linoleum. The late October chill had begun to seep through the school's aging windows, and she pulled her cardigan tighter around her slender frame. 3 years of widowhood had left her with an instinctive awareness of absence, a sixth sense for when something wasn't quite right. And something definitely wasn't right with Lily Parker. She scanned the hallway, checking the girls' bathroom and the water fountain alcove before heading toward the cafeteria. The lunch ladies were already cleaning up, industrial-sized mops slapping wetly against the floor. "Marjorie, have you seen Lily Parker? Dark hair, usually wears a purple backpack." The cafeteria manager shook her head. "That little one with the big eyes? Haven't seen her since the lunch bell. Come to think of it, haven't seen her eat much lately either." Rebecca frowned. "What do you mean?" "She comes through the line, takes her tray, but I don't think she's eating. Just sits there pushing food around." Marjorie leaned on her mop. "Thought you teachers were supposed to notice these things." Rebecca felt a prick of guilt. She had noticed, of course she had, but she'd attributed Lily's behavioral changes to something else, something more common. New sibling rivalry, perhaps. Parents fighting. The usual disruptions of childhood. "Thanks, Marjorie," Rebecca replied, choosing to ignore the barb. Outside, the playground was nearly empty, with only a few stragglers being herded inside by the recess monitors. Rebecca shielded her eyes against the autumn sun, scanning the play structures, the tetherball poles, the painted hopscotch squares. No Lily. Rebecca was about to turn back when a flash of purple caught her eye, the corner of a backpack disappearing around the edge of the building, toward the wooded area that bordered the school property. Her heart quickened. Students weren't allowed in that area unsupervised. She hurried across the asphalt, her teacher's intuition warring with her desire not to overreact. Lily had always been one of her best students. Diligent, bright, eager to please. Until recently. As Rebecca rounded the corner, she slowed her pace, not wanting to startle the child. She saw Lily about 50 yards ahead, making her way along a narrow dirt path that wound between the maple trees. The girl moved with purpose, her purple backpack bouncing against her small frame. Rebecca hesitated. Following a student off school grounds without alerting anyone wasn't protocol. But neither was allowing a 7-year-old to wander into the woods alone. She pulled out her phone, quickly texting the school secretary, checking on Lily Parker behind the school. Back in 10 minutes. Rebecca kept her distance, staying just close enough to keep Lily's purple backpack in sight through the trees. The woods weren't deep, just a small buffer between the school and the residential neighborhood beyond, but they were thick enough that Rebecca soon lost sight of the school building behind her. The girl stopped beside a large oak tree and glanced around furtively before kneeling down and unzipping her backpack. Rebecca ducked behind a tree trunk, feeling oddly like an intruder. Was this some kind of game? A secret club? A childhood ritual Rebecca had forgotten from her own youth? From her hiding spot, Rebecca watched as Lily removed her lunchbox and opened it carefully. Inside was the standard lunch she'd seen the girl pack away untouched day after day. A sandwich, an apple, a small bag of carrot sticks, and what looked like a pudding cup. Rebecca felt a heaviness in her chest. Was Lily struggling with some kind of eating disorder? At 7, Lily repacked the lunchbox, zipped it into a smaller front pocket of the backpack, and continued down the path. Rebecca followed, her concern deepening with each step. After another minute, the trees thinned out, revealing a small clearing beside a creek that ran along the edge of the property. Rebecca stopped abruptly at the edge of the clearing, her hand flying to her mouth. There, nestled against the embankment, was a makeshift shelter constructed of tarps, a tent, and what appeared to be salvaged building materials. A man sat on an overturned milk crate, his head in his hands. Beside him, a small boy of about 4 slept on a sleeping bag, his face flushed and sweaty despite the cool air. "Daddy," Lily's voice carried across the clearing. "I brought lunch. Is Noah feeling any better?" The man looked up, and Rebecca was struck by the deep circles under his eyes, the several days' worth of stubble on his hollow cheeks. Despite his disheveled appearance, there was something in the shape of his face, the set of his shoulders, that spoke of someone unaccustomed to such circumstances. "Hey, Pumpkin," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "He's still got a fever. I've been giving him Tylenol, but we're almost out." Lily approached him, unzipping the front pocket of her backpack. "I brought my lunch. And look, they had chocolate pudding today." She held it out like a precious gift. The man's face crumpled slightly before he composed himself. "That's great, sweetie, but you should eat that. You need your strength for school." "I'm not hungry," Lily insisted. "And Noah likes pudding. Maybe it'll make him feel better." "Lily," the man said gently, "you've been saying you're not hungry for 2 weeks now. You need to eat." Rebecca couldn't stay hidden any longer. She stepped into the clearing, leaves crunching beneath her feet. "Lily!" The girl whirled around, her face draining of color. The man jumped to his feet, instinctively moving between the stranger and the sleeping boy. "Ms. Collins." Lily's voice was barely audible. I was just... "It's okay, Lily," Rebecca said, keeping her voice calm despite the shock and questions whirling through her mind. She turned to the man. "I'm Rebecca Collins, Lily's teacher." The man regarded her warily, his body tense. Up close, Rebecca could see that his clothes, though dirty, were once of good quality. His watch looked expensive, though it seemed to have stopped. "Daniel Parker," he finally said. "Lily's father." Rebecca glanced at the sleeping boy, noting his flushed cheeks and labored breathing. "And that's my son Noah," Daniel answered, his voice tight with defensiveness and something else, shame. "My younger son." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the soft babbling of the creek and Noah's congested breathing. "Lily's been bringing you her lunches," Rebecca said. It wasn't a question. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "I've told her not to. I've told her she needs to eat." "Daddy needs it more," Lily piped up. "And Noah too. I can eat when I get home." "When you get home," Rebecca repeated softly, looking around at the makeshift shelter. "Is this home now?" Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at Lily and then at Noah before meeting Rebecca's gaze. "For the time being, it's temporary." Rebecca's mind raced through possibilities, protocols, proper channels. But all she could focus on was the labored breathing of the little boy on the sleeping bag. "How long has Noah been sick?" she asked. 3 days, Daniel answered. "It started as a cold, but the fever won't break. I've been giving him children's Tylenol, keeping him hydrated as best I can." Rebecca moved closer to look at the child. His cheeks were scarlet against the pallor of his face, his breathing uneven. She placed a hand on his forehead and felt the heat radiating from his skin. "He needs medical attention," she said firmly. "This isn't just a cold." "We don't have insurance anymore," Daniel said, his voice cracking. "I can't." "Daddy, is Noah going to be okay?" Lily asked, her small face pinched with worry. Daniel kneeled beside his daughter, placing his hands on her shoulders. "Of course he is, Pumpkin. He just needs rest. That's all." Rebecca watched the interaction, noting the gentle way Daniel handled his daughter despite his own obvious exhaustion. This wasn't neglect, at least not willful neglect. This was desperation. "Mr. Parker," she said quietly, "Noah needs to see a doctor. I'm going to call for help." Panic flashed across Daniel's face. "Please don't. They'll take them away from me. I can't. They're all I have left." Rebecca felt her heart constrict at the raw fear in his voice. "Who will take them away?" "Child Services. The state." He ran a hand through his unkempt hair. "We lost our house. Emma, my wife. She died 6 months ago. Heart condition. The medical bills, the funeral costs. I fell behind. Way behind. But I'm trying. I've been looking for work, but it's hard with Noah, and the shelters won't take a single father with kids, or they're full, or—" He broke off, seeming to realize he was rambling. "Please," he said, "we just need a little more time." Rebecca looked at Noah again, at his flushed face and chapped lips. Then at Lily, thin and pale, dark circles under her eyes belying her claim that she ate at home. There was no home. "Noah needs help now," she said firmly. "I understand you're afraid, but his health has to come first." Daniel's shoulders slumped. "They'll separate us. I'll do everything I can to prevent that," Rebecca promised, surprising herself with her own certainty. "But right now, Noah needs medical care that you can't provide here." She pulled out her phone, moved slightly away, and dialed 911. As she gave the dispatcher details of their location and Noah's condition, she watched Daniel kneel beside his son, gently stroking the boy's hair with a trembling hand. "They're sending an ambulance," Rebecca said when she ended the call. "They'll be here in a few minutes." Daniel nodded, resignation replacing the panic in his eyes. "Thank you for caring about Noah," he said quietly, "and for looking out for Lily at school. She thinks the world of you." Lily had moved to sit beside her father, her small hand wrapped in his larger one. The sight sent an unexpected pang through Rebecca's chest. It had been 3 years since John's death, 3 years since she'd felt that particular kind of connection. The unspoken understanding between people who shared a life, who protected each other. "How have you been managing Lily's school attendance?" Rebecca asked, genuinely curious. The school required proof of residence for enrollment. "We still get mail at our old address," Daniel explained. "The new owners, the bank, really forward it to a P.O. box. I've been using a friend's address on the school forms. He doesn't mind. Keeps Lily's life somewhat normal." "And you've been bringing her to school every day, even from here?" Daniel nodded. "We walk. It's about a mile. She needs her education. That's the one thing I can still give her." Rebecca felt a lump form in her throat. She thought about all the parents she dealt with daily. The ones who couldn't be bothered to check homework, who missed conferences, who seemed to view school as simply free childcare. And here was this man, living in a tent in the woods, making sure his daughter never missed a day of learning. The sound of sirens cut through the air, still distant but approaching. Daniel tensed. "It's going to be okay," Rebecca said, hoping she wasn't making a promise she couldn't keep. "I'll stay with you through this." "Why?" Daniel asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "You don't know us." Rebecca thought of her empty apartment, of the routine that had sustained her through grief. Wake, teach, grade, sleep, repeat. Of the careful distance she maintained from her students' lives outside school hours. "Because Lily is my student," she said simply. "And because you're doing the best you can in an impossible situation." The sirens grew louder. Lily pressed herself against her father's side. "Are they going to take Noah to the hospital?" she asked, her voice small. "Yes, sweetie," Rebecca answered, kneeling to meet the girl's eyes. "They're going to help him get better." "Can I go too?" Daniel and Rebecca exchanged glances. "We'll see," Daniel said carefully. "The doctors need to help Noah first." Paramedics emerged from the trees, guided by a school security guard who must have directed them from the building. Rebecca stepped forward to intercept them, briefly explaining the situation while keeping the details of the family's circumstances vague. 2 paramedics immediately went to Noah, checking his vitals while asking Daniel questions about the duration of symptoms, medications given, and allergies. The third radioed in their findings, his expression grim as he reported the child's temperature. 104.2. "We need to transport him now," the lead paramedic said. "Dad, you can ride with us." "My daughter," Daniel began. "I'll bring Lily to the hospital," Rebecca offered quickly. "If that's okay with you." Relief washed over Daniel's face. "Thank you." As the paramedics transferred Noah to a stretcher, Rebecca noticed the school security guard speaking into his radio, his eyes scanning the makeshift shelter. She knew what would happen next. Reports would be filed, authorities notified. The school principal would have questions. The superintendent. The board. But watching Daniel climb into the ambulance beside his son's stretcher, Lily's small hand clutched in his, Rebecca knew she'd made the right choice. Protocol existed for a reason, but sometimes humanity had to come first. "I'll meet you at Memorial," she called as the ambulance doors closed. Only then did she turn to face the security guard, whose expression wavered between confusion and concern. "Ms. Collins," he began. "Principal Washburn is asking for you to report to her office immediately." Rebecca nodded, already walking back toward the school. "I'll speak with her after I take Lily to the hospital." But the principal said, "Tell her I'm fulfilling my duty of care to a student," Rebecca interrupted, surprised by her own assertiveness. "I'll explain everything later." As she guided Lily through the woods, the girl's purple backpack bobbing ahead of her, Rebecca tried to process what she discovered. A family shattered by loss and circumstance. A father doing everything he could to keep his children safe and educated despite unimaginable hardship. And a little girl who had been silently going hungry to feed her family, carrying a burden no child should bear. "Ms. Collins." Lily's voice broke through her thoughts. "Are they going to take Noah and Daddy away from me?" Rebecca stopped, kneeling down to look directly into the child's worried eyes. "I'm going to do everything I can to keep your family together," she promised. Everything. Only later would she realize the magnitude of that promise, and how it would change all their lives forever. The antiseptic smell of Memorial Hospital's emergency department burned Rebecca's nostrils as she guided Lily through the automatic doors. The fluorescent lights overhead cast everyone in a sickly pallor, making even the healthy appear ill. Rebecca kept a protective hand on Lily's shoulder, feeling the girl's body trembling slightly beneath her touch. "I don't like hospitals," Lily whispered, her eyes darting nervously around the crowded waiting room. Rebecca squeezed her shoulder gently. "I know, sweetie. I don't either." She didn't elaborate on her own reasons. The long, terrible nights sitting beside John's bed, watching chemotherapy drip into his veins. The way his once robust frame had withered until the hospital gown hung from his shoulders like a tent. The moment when the monitors flatlined and the room filled with a cacophony of alarms and voices and movement that somehow still felt like the deepest silence she'd ever known. Instead, she guided Lily to the reception desk. "We're looking for Noah Parker. He was brought in by ambulance about 40 minutes ago." The receptionist tapped at her keyboard. "Are you family?" "This is his sister," Rebecca explained, nudging Lily forward slightly. "I'm her teacher. Their father came in the ambulance." The woman's eyes softened slightly. "They've taken him to pediatrics. 4th floor, room 412. "Thank you," Rebecca said, already steering Lily toward the elevators. In the confined space of the elevator, Lily's small voice emerged again. "Is my dad in trouble?" Rebecca considered her answer carefully. She didn't believe in lying to children. They always knew. But the full, complicated truth was beyond what a 7-year-old should have to process. "Your dad isn't in trouble," she said finally. "But he's in a difficult situation, and sometimes when grown-ups are struggling, other grown-ups want to help. But sometimes their help isn't actually helpful," Lily said with a wisdom that made Rebecca's heart ache. "That's true," she admitted as the elevator doors opened to the pediatric floor. "Sometimes people trying to help don't understand what you really need." They followed the signs to room 412, where they found Daniel standing beside a hospital bed. Noah lay small and pale against the white sheets, and 4 in his arm and monitors attached to his chest. A doctor was speaking to Daniel in low tones, pointing at something on a tablet screen. Lily broke away from Rebecca and ran to her father, who scooped her up automatically, balancing her on his hip as though she weighed nothing. Rebecca noticed how his jeans hung loose on his frame, how his collarbones stood prominent beneath his worn t-shirt. He'd been going hungry too. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked black hair and kind eyes, glanced at Rebecca questioningly. "This is Ms. Collins," Daniel explained. "Lily's teacher. She brought Lily here." "Rebecca," she corrected, extending her hand. "Rebecca Collins." "Dr. Patel," the doctor replied, shaking her hand. "I was just explaining to Mr. Parker that Noah has pneumonia. It's progressed to a concerning degree. We've started him on 4 antibiotics and fluids for the dehydration." Rebecca glanced at Noah, noting his flushed cheeks and the labored rise and fall of his chest even in sleep. "Will he be all right?" "Children are remarkably resilient," Dr. Patel said, a non-answer that Rebecca recognized from her own days sitting beside John's hospital bed. "We've caught it in time to prevent serious complications, but he'll need to remain hospitalized for at least a few days." Daniel's face tightened. "I've already explained our situation, and as I said, there are programs that can help," Dr. Patel interjected gently. "The hospital social worker will be up to speak with you shortly." She made a few notes on her tablet, promised to check back later, and left the room. An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only by the steady beeping of Noah's monitors. Lily wriggled in her father's arms until he set her down. She immediately climbed onto a chair beside Noah's bed, leaning over to examine the 4 in his arm with the fascination only a sibling could muster for another's medical equipment. "Don't touch anything," Daniel warned. Rebecca moved to stand beside him, keeping her voice low. "How is he really?" Daniel ran a hand through his unkempt hair. "They said his oxygen levels were dangerously low. If it had gone on much longer—" He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Rebecca felt a chill run through her. She'd found them just in time. Hours later could have meant a tragically different outcome for the little boy. "Thank you," Daniel said suddenly, his voice rough with emotion, "for following her, for calling the ambulance. I was so afraid of the consequences that I couldn't see how sick he really was." "Any teacher would have done the same," Rebecca demurred. Daniel shook his head. "No. Most would have reported us to authorities without getting involved. You stayed. You're still here." Rebecca had no answer for that. He was right. She should have simply alerted the school administration and let the proper channels take over. Protocol would have dictated a call to Child Protective Services, a report filed, hands washed of the situation. Instead, she'd inserted herself directly into this family's crisis. The question was, why? "I've seen too many children fall through the cracks," she said finally. "Good kids with potential who just needed someone to see them, to really see them." Daniel's gaze was searching, as though trying to understand her motives. Before he could respond, the door opened, and a woman in a navy suit entered, carrying a file folder. "Mr. Parker? I'm Vanessa Morales from Hospital Social Services." Her practiced smile included both Daniel and Rebecca. "I understand you have some housing insecurity issues that may have contributed to your son's condition." Daniel's posture stiffened. "My son got sick because children get sick, not because we're temporarily displaced." Vanessa's professional demeanor didn't waver. "Of course, but living outdoors can exacerbate health conditions, especially in children." She glanced at her file. "I understand Noah is 4, and Lily is 7. "Yes," Daniel replied tersely. "And you've been living where exactly?" "In the woods behind Oakwood Elementary," Rebecca supplied when Daniel hesitated. "Mr. Parker has been maintaining Lily's school attendance despite their situation." Vanessa made a note. "And how long have you been homeless, Mr. Parker?" The word made Daniel flinch. "We're not homeless. We're between homes. It's been about 6 weeks. And before that, we had a house on Maple Street. The bank foreclosed after my wife died. Medical bills, funeral costs. I fell behind on the mortgage." "I see." Vanessa's tone was sympathetic but clinical. And you're currently unemployed. I was a contractor. I owned my own business. But after Emma died, I couldn't manage full-time work and care for Noah. Daniel's voice grew more defensive with each question. I've been picking up day labor when I can, but without childcare for Noah. I understand, Vanessa interrupted gently. And I'm not here to judge you, Mr. Parker. I'm here to connect you with resources. She pulled several pamphlets from her folder. There's a family shelter on the east side of town that might have space. They accept fathers with children, unlike some of the other facilities. I can make a call. Daniel's face flushed with shame. We tried the shelters first. They were either full or wouldn't take a single father with kids. Rules change. Beds open up, Vanessa said pragmatically. But I should warn you that I am obligated to report this situation to Child Protective Services. Living outdoors with minor children, especially in autumn heading into winter, is considered potentially endangering. Daniel's hands clenched at his sides. I've done everything possible to keep them safe. I've never missed getting Lily to school. I've kept them clean, fed. Your son has pneumonia, Vanessa pointed out not unkindly. And it appears you've been relying on your daughter's school lunches for food. Rebecca stepped forward. That's not entirely fair. Mr. Parker has been doing his best in an impossible situation. These are extraordinary circumstances. Vanessa turned her attention to Rebecca. And you are? Rebecca Collins. I'm Lily's teacher at Oakwood Elementary. I see. Vanessa made another note. And it's standard practice for teachers to accompany students to the hospital in these situations? Rebecca felt her cheeks warm. No. But I promised Lily I'd bring her to see her brother. Ms. Collins found us, Daniel explained. She followed Lily from school and discovered our living situation. And did you immediately report this to the authorities, Ms. Collins? Vanessa asked. I called an ambulance for Noah, Rebecca replied, deliberately sidestepping the question. His medical needs were the priority. Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. I understand, but as a mandated reporter, you're obligated to. I'm aware of my obligations, Rebecca interrupted, surprising herself with her defensiveness. I've been teaching for 12 years. The tension in the room was broken by Lily's small voice. Is Noah going to be okay? All three adults turned to look at her, perched on the chair beside her brother's bed. Her dark eyes were wide with worry, her small hands twisted in her lap. Yes, sweetie, Vanessa replied, her tone softening instantly. The doctors are giving him medicine to make him better. Are you going to take us away from Daddy? Lily asked, cutting to the heart of the matter with a child's directness. Vanessa hesitated, clearly unaccustomed to such bluntness from a child. Well, No one is taking you anywhere right now, Rebecca interjected firmly. Your dad is right here, and Noah is getting the care he needs. Lily's gaze shifted between the adults, clearly not entirely convinced. Promise. I promise we'll do everything possible to keep your family together, Rebecca said before Vanessa could respond. Everything. The social worker shot Rebecca a look that clearly communicated she had overstepped. Ms. Collins, perhaps we should step outside for a moment? Rebecca nodded reluctantly, following Vanessa into the hallway. As soon as the door closed behind them, Vanessa turned to her. I understand you care about your student, but you can't make promises like that, she said, keeping her voice low. The reality is that temporary placement in foster care may be necessary while Mr. Parker secures stable housing. He lost his wife 6 months ago, Rebecca countered. He's grieving, trying to care for 2 young children alone, and facing financial hardship as a result of medical bills. Separating him from his children now would be needlessly traumatic for all of them. That may be, but my obligation is to ensure those children are safe. They're safer with their father than with strangers, Rebecca insisted. He's not neglectful or abusive. He's desperate. Vanessa studied Rebecca's face. You seem very invested in this family, Miss Collins. Something in her tone made Rebecca bristle. I'm invested in all my students' well-being. And do you often follow them home? Insert yourself into their family situations? Accompany them to hospitals? When necessary, Rebecca replied, her voice cooling. When a child is clearly in distress and standard protocols aren't addressing the actual problem. Vanessa sighed, softening slightly. Look, I can see you care, but there are boundaries for a reason. Proper channels exist to protect everyone involved, including you. I'm not concerned about protecting myself, Rebecca said. I'm concerned about a family that's already been through hell losing each other because of bureaucracy. It's not bureaucracy, it's child welfare law. Laws are meant to help people, not hurt them. Vanessa regarded her silently for a moment. I'll make some calls. See if we can get the Parkers' emergency housing together. But I can't promise anything. And I still have to file a report with CPS. That's non-negotiable. I understand, Rebecca conceded. I just want you to consider the whole picture. Daniel Parker isn't a neglectful father. He's a widower who fell on hard times trying to care for his kids alone. I'll note that in my report, Vanessa promised. Now, I need to speak with Mr. Parker alone for a few minutes. Hospital policy. Rebecca nodded, watching as Vanessa returned to the room. Through the small window in the door, she could see Daniel's tense posture, the way his shoulders hunched as the social worker spoke to him. Lily had climbed into his lap, her small arms wrapped around his neck as though sensing his distress. Rebecca's phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out to find 3 missed calls and a text message from Patricia Washburn, the principal of Oakwood Elementary. Need to speak with you immediately regarding incident behind school. Security reported. Superintendent notified. Where are you? Rebecca sighed, typing a brief reply. At Memorial Hospital with Lily Parker and her family. Emergency medical situation. We'll explain everything tomorrow. The response came almost instantly. Not acceptable. Report to my office first thing tomorrow, 7 a.m. Serious protocol breach. Rebecca slipped the phone back into her pocket without responding. Tomorrow's problems could wait. Right now, the Parkers needed an advocate, and somehow, without quite meaning to, she had become that person. The hospital door opened, and Vanessa emerged, looking slightly less stern than before. You can go back in, she said. I've given Mr. Parker information about emergency housing assistance and some other resources. I've also explained that a CPS caseworker will be contacting him, likely tomorrow. Thank you, Rebecca said sincerely. I appreciate your help. Just. Vanessa hesitated. Be careful about getting too involved. It rarely ends well for anyone. With that cryptic warning, she walked away, her sensible heels clicking against the linoleum. Rebecca returned to Noah's room, finding Daniel sitting beside the bed, Lily now curled up asleep against his chest. He looked up as she entered, his expression a complex mixture of gratitude and wariness. She says they might be able to get us into emergency family housing, he said quietly. But if they can't, they'll place the kids in temporary foster care. Rebecca pulled a chair up beside him. We won't let that happen. We. Daniel's eyebrow raised slightly. I know I've inserted myself into your situation, Rebecca acknowledged. And I understand if you'd prefer I step back. But I want to help, if you'll let me. Why? The question was simple but profound. Rebecca considered her answer carefully. Because I know what it's like to have your life fall apart overnight. To lose the person you built your world around. Your husband, Daniel said, not a question. Rebecca nodded. John. Cancer. 3 years ago. She rarely spoke about it, especially with parents of her students. But something about Daniel's situation, his raw grief still visible beneath the layers of exhaustion and worry, resonated with her own experience. I'm sorry, he offered, the words carrying the weight of someone who truly understood such loss. After he died, I had a support system, Rebecca continued. Family, friends, colleagues, people who made sure I ate, that bills got paid, that I got out of bed in the morning. You're trying to do all of that alone, plus care for 2 children. It's too much for anyone. Daniel looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully against him despite the hospital chaos around them. Emma got sick so suddenly, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Heart condition no one knew about. One day she was fine, complaining about heartburn. The next, he swallowed hard. The doctors said it was an aortic dissection. By the time they figured it out, it was too late. I'm so sorry, Rebecca said, the inadequacy of the words hanging between them. The medical bills came first, Daniel continued, as though needing to explain. Emergency surgery, intensive care for 3 days. Even with insurance, our portion was astronomical. Then the funeral costs. I tried to keep up with the mortgage, but between that and trying to care for the kids, he shook his head. The business suffered. Clients don't want to hear that you can't finish their kitchen remodel because your wife died. Rebecca listened silently, letting him talk. Perhaps for the first time in months, Daniel had found someone willing to hear his story without judgment. We had savings, but it went fast. By the time the bank foreclosed, we were living on credit cards. When those maxed out, we stayed with a friend for a while, but his wife wasn't comfortable having us there long-term. Daniel's gaze moved to Noah, his small chest rising and falling beneath the hospital blanket. The shelters were full or wouldn't take us. We spent a few nights in the car before I decided to set up camp. It was supposed to be temporary. How long ago was that? Rebecca asked gently. Almost 6 weeks, Daniel admitted. I kept telling myself it would just be for a few days, until I found something. But rental applications require income verification, security deposits. No one wants to rent to an unemployed widower with 2 kids. Rebecca thought about her own apartment, a modest 2-bedroom that had felt cavernous after John's death. She'd considered downsizing but couldn't bear to leave the space where they'd built their life together. Now it sat half empty, John's clothes still hanging in the closet, his books on the shelves, as though waiting for his return. What will you do if they can't find emergency housing? She asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. I don't know. I can't lose them. They're all I have left of her, of our life together. The raw emotion in his voice struck Rebecca to her core. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand over his. You won't lose them. We'll figure something out. He looked down at their hands, then back at her face, searching for something. Sincerity, perhaps, or hidden motives. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him, because he nodded slightly. Thank you, he said simply. A nurse entered the room, breaking the moment. She checked Noah's vitals, adjusted his and made notes on his chart. He's responding well to the antibiotics, she informed them. His fever's down to 101.3. That's good, right? Daniel asked anxiously. Very good, the nurse confirmed. Dr. Patel will be by in the morning to reassess. We've arranged a cot for you to stay overnight, and there's a parent lounge down the hall with coffee and snacks. She glanced at Lily, still sleeping against Daniel's chest. Poor little thing's exhausted. If you want, we can arrange for a second cot for her. Thank you, Daniel said. That would be great. The nurse smiled kindly and left to make the arrangements. Rebecca gently withdrew her hand from Daniel's, suddenly aware of how long it had been resting there. I should probably go, she said, glancing at her watch. It was nearly 7 in the evening. Will you be all right? Daniel nodded. We'll manage. We always do. Rebecca stood, gathering her purse. I'll come back tomorrow after school, if that's okay. You don't have to. I want to, she interrupted. And I can bring some things for you. Clean clothes for Lily for school, maybe? And for you and Noah. Daniel's pride warred visibly with practicality. We don't have much left. Most of our things were put in storage after the foreclosure. But I couldn't keep up with the payments. They auctioned everything off last month. The casual brutality of the statement, an entire life's possessions sold to strangers, hit Rebecca like a physical blow. I'm so sorry. It's just stuff, Daniel said, but his voice betrayed him. What sizes do you need? For clothes. Lily wears a size 7 in girls. Noah's in 4T. And he hesitated, as though trying to remember. A medium in shirts. 32 to 34 in pants. Rebecca made a mental note. I'll see what I can find, and I'll bring some food, too. Real food, not hospital cafeteria sandwiches. You really don't have to do all this? Daniel protested weakly. I know. Rebecca smiled slightly. But I'm going to anyway. She approached the bed and gently touched Noah's hand, careful not to disturb the four. Feel better, little one? She whispered. Then she leaned down and brushed a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. The child stirred slightly but didn't wake. I'll see you tomorrow, Rebecca said to Daniel, moving toward the door. Rebecca! His voice stopped her. Thank you. For everything. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and slipped out of the room. The hallway was quieter now, the bustle of the day shift giving way to the more subdued rhythms of evening. Rebecca made her way to the elevator, her mind racing with all she'd learned, all she'd promised, all she'd felt. As the elevator doors closed, she leaned against the wall and released a long, shaky breath. What had she gotten herself into? Vanessa's warning echoed in her mind. Be careful about getting too involved. It rarely ends well for anyone. Yet as the elevator descended, Rebecca couldn't shake the image of Daniel, holding his sleeping daughter, keeping a vigil beside his sick son. A man who had lost everything but still made sure his daughter got to school every day. Who went hungry so his children could eat. By the time she reached her car in the hospital parking lot, Rebecca had made a decision. Protocol be damned. Proper channels be damned. This family needed help. Real help, not bureaucratic processes that might tear them apart in the name of protection. And somehow, for reasons she couldn't fully articulate even to herself, she was going to be the one to provide it. She started her car, pulled out her phone, and dialed her brother's number. After 3 rings, his familiar voice answered. Becca? Everything okay? Michael, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I need a favor. A big one. As she pulled out of the hospital parking lot into the gathering dusk, Rebecca explained the situation to her brother, laying out what she needed, what the Parkers needed. By the time she reached her apartment, Michael had agreed to help, and Rebecca had taken the first concrete step toward fulfilling her promise. Tomorrow would bring complications, a meeting with the principal, questions from colleagues, the inevitable involvement of Child Protective Services. But tonight, Rebecca entered her half-empty apartment with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. On her dining table sat a framed photograph of John, smiling from a hiking trail the summer before his diagnosis. Rebecca picked it up, her fingers tracing the familiar contours of his face. I think you'd approve, she whispered to the empty room. At least, I hope you would. Setting the photo down, she headed to her spare bedroom, the one she'd once imagined might someday belong to a child. Instead, it had become a storage space for items she couldn't bear to part with after John's death. Tonight, it would serve a new purpose. Rebecca began clearing the space methodically, setting aside John's books and winter clothes, arranging the furniture to accommodate a family who had lost everything but each other. As she worked late into the night, she felt something shift within her. The protective shell she'd built around her grief cracking open to make room for someone else's. Whether this was healing or folly, she couldn't yet say. But for the first time in 3 years, Rebecca Collins was letting someone new into the carefully ordered world she'd constructed in the aftermath of loss. And somehow, despite all logic and professional boundaries, it felt right. Rebecca arrived at Oakwood Elementary at precisely 6:55 a.m., steeling herself for the meeting with Principal Washburn. She'd barely slept, spending most of the night preparing her spare bedroom and gathering essentials for the Parker family. Clothes from local donation centers her church maintained, groceries, toiletries, even a few books and toys she thought the children might enjoy. By the time she'd finished, her normally tidy apartment looked like a relief distribution center. The school building was quiet this early, most teachers not due to arrive for another 30 minutes. Rebecca made her way down the empty corridor, her sensible shoes echoing against the polished floors. Outside Principal Washburn's office, she paused to straighten her blouse and smooth her hair, aware that her appearance, slightly rumpled from her restless night, wouldn't help her case. She knocked twice on the frosted glass door. Enter, came the clipped response. Patricia Washburn sat behind her imposing desk, a sleek, modern piece that seemed at odds with the aging school building. In her mid-50s, with expertly highlighted brown hair and rimless glasses, she projected an aura of efficient authority. Rebecca had always respected her, even when they disagreed on educational approaches. Today, however, the principal's expression was thunderous. "Rebecca," she said, not bothering with pleasantries, "close the door and sit down." Rebecca did as instructed, settling into one of the uncomfortable chairs positioned in front of the desk. Deliberately uncomfortable, Rebecca had always suspected, to discourage lengthy meetings. "Would you care to explain yesterday's incident?" Principal Washburn asked, her voice carefully controlled. Rebecca took a deep breath. "I noticed that one of my students, Lily Parker, had been hiding her lunch and disappearing during lunch periods. Yesterday, I followed her and discovered that she was bringing the food to her father and younger brother, who have been living in a makeshift shelter in the woods behind the school." Principal Washburn's expression didn't change. "And you decided to handle this situation entirely on your own, without notifying administration or following mandatory reporting protocols." It wasn't a question, but Rebecca answered anyway. "The younger child, Noah, was seriously ill with what turned out to be pneumonia. My immediate concern was getting him medical attention. So you called 911? "Yes. And then accompanied the child to the hospital." "I took Lily to meet her father and brother at the hospital, yes." Principal Washburn removed her glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. "Rebecca, you've been teaching long enough to know the proper procedures for situations like this. You should have immediately reported your suspicions about Lily to administration. You should never have left school property to follow a student without authorization. You absolutely should not have inserted yourself into this family's personal situation by accompanying them to the hospital." Rebecca felt a flare of defensiveness. "With all due respect, Patricia, Noah Parker needed immediate medical attention. He could have died if I'd waited to file paperwork and have a committee meeting about the appropriate response." "That's hyperbole," Principal Washburn dismissed. "And it doesn't excuse the breach of protocol. You put yourself, the school, and the district at significant liability risk. Not to mention potentially traumatizing a student by confronting her family without proper support services present." "Lily wasn't traumatized by my presence," Rebecca countered. "She was relieved that someone was helping her family, and the hospital social worker was involved immediately after Noah was admitted." Principal Washburn replaced her glasses, fixing Rebecca with a stern look. "The superintendent has been notified. The school board will need to be briefed, given the potential liability issues. And I've received a call this morning from Child Protective Services, who are opening an investigation." Rebecca's stomach clenched. "I expected as much. Did you also expect that they expressed concern about your level of involvement with the family? Apparently, you made certain promises to them about keeping them together that directly contradicted what the hospital social worker was telling them." "I promised to help them," Rebecca clarified, "and I intend to keep that promise." Principal Washburn's eyebrows rose. "Rebecca, you are this child's teacher. Nothing more. You are not qualified to determine what's best for this family in terms of housing, legal assistance, or custody arrangements. Those decisions belong to the proper authorities and the family themselves. The proper authorities were about to separate a grieving family that's already lost too much," Rebecca said, unable to keep the emotion from her voice. "Daniel Parker isn't neglectful or abusive. He's a widower who fell on hard times trying to care for his children alone. That may be, but it's not your place to make that determination or to intervene in the systems designed to protect these children." Rebecca leaned forward. "Those systems don't always protect, Patricia. Sometimes they cause more harm than good. You know that as well as I do." A flicker of something, recognition, perhaps, crossed Principal Washburn's face before her professional mask reasserted itself. "Regardless of your personal feelings about the system, you've put this school in a difficult position. The superintendent is concerned about potential media attention if this situation escalates." "Media attention?" Rebecca repeated incredulously. "A family is living in the woods behind our school, and the administration is worried about bad press? We're concerned about all aspects of this situation, Principal Washburn replied coolly, including the welfare of the Parker children. But we're also responsible for maintaining proper boundaries and following established protocols. Rebecca felt her patience fraying. And what would those protocols have accomplished for Noah Parker, who had a temperature of 104 degrees? For Lily, who's been going hungry to feed her family? For Daniel, who's lost everything trying to keep his children safe and educated? Principal Washburn was silent for a moment, studying Rebecca's face. When she spoke again, her tone had softened slightly. You've always been passionate about your students, Rebecca. It's what makes you an excellent teacher. But this level of personal involvement. She hesitated. It's not sustainable, and it's not appropriate. What would you have done? Rebecca asked. If you'd found them there, a sick child and a desperate father, what would you have done differently? I would have followed the established protocols, Principal Washburn said without hesitation. Called the proper authorities, allowed the systems in place to function as they're designed to. Even knowing those systems might separate the family? That's not my decision to make. Nor is it yours. Rebecca sat back in her chair, suddenly weary. So what happens now? Principal Washburn slid a folder across the desk. I'm issuing a formal written warning for your breach of protocol. It will be placed in your personnel file. Additionally, you'll be required to attend a refresher training on mandatory reporting procedures and professional boundaries. Rebecca nodded, having expected as much. And Lily? She's being assigned to Ms. Peterson's class, effective immediately. What? Rebecca straightened, shock coursing through her. You're removing her from my class? Given your inappropriate level of involvement with her family situation, it's the only prudent course of action, Principal Washburn explained. It creates a clear conflict of interest to have her remain in your classroom. She trusts me, Rebecca protested. After everything she's been through, you're going to force her to adjust to a new teacher too? It's precisely because of everything she's been through that we need to maintain clear professional boundaries, Principal Washburn countered. Ms. Peterson is an excellent teacher. Lily will be fine. Rebecca felt as though the air had been sucked from the room. This will only confuse and upset her more. Perhaps you should have considered that before inserting yourself so deeply into her family's personal matters. Principal Washburn's tone was final. The decision has been made, Rebecca. When Lily arrives today, you'll escort her to Ms. Peterson's classroom and explain the change. Rebecca sat in stunned silence, trying to process this unexpected complication. She'd been prepared for disciplinary action against herself, but not for Lily to be removed from her care. Is there anything else? She asked finally, her voice tight. Principal Washburn regarded her for a long moment. Rebecca, I understand your concern for this family. Truly, I do. But you need to consider the larger implications of your actions. Not just for your career, but for the Parkers as well. Sometimes, what seems like help can actually complicate matters further. Rebecca stood, gathering her purse. I believe I'm doing the right thing, even if it's not the most procedurally correct thing. That's your prerogative, Principal Washburn replied. But in this building, we follow proper protocols. Is that understood? Perfectly, Rebecca said, unable to keep a hint of coldness from her voice. Good. Please send Lily to Ms. Peterson's room when she arrives. And Rebecca, Principal Washburn added as Rebecca reached for the door. I'd advise you to be very careful about your continued involvement with this family. The school board takes these matters seriously, and your position here could be jeopardized if you persist in overstepping boundaries. The threat hung in the air between them. Rebecca nodded once and left the office, closing the door perhaps a bit more firmly than necessary. In the empty hallway, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing heart. She'd known there would be consequences, but losing Lily from her classroom felt like a particularly cruel punishment, one that would hurt the child more than anyone. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A text message from an unknown number. Ms. Collins, this is Daniel Parker. Hospital gave me your number. Noah improved overnight, but they're keeping him another day. CPS case worker coming at 10 a.m. not sure what to expect. Rebecca hesitated only briefly before replying. I'll be there. Just need to arrange classroom coverage. Try not to worry. The response came almost immediately. You don't have to do this. Rebecca typed quickly. I know. I want to. We'll explain more when I see you. She put her phone away and headed to her classroom, mind racing. She'd need to find someone to cover her class after lunch, prepare materials for Lily's transition to Miss Peterson's room, and somehow make it to the hospital by 10 a.m. One step at a time, she told herself. Just like she'd advised countless students facing overwhelming tasks. One step at a time. The hospital corridors felt more familiar than they should have as Rebecca made her way to Noah's room shortly before 10 a.m. She'd managed to arrange coverage for her afternoon classes, owing several favors to do so, and had grimly handed Lily over to Miss Peterson that morning, explaining as gently as possible that the change was just to help everyone focus on helping her family. Lily's confused, hurt expression had nearly broken Rebecca's resolve, but she'd stayed firm, promising to check on Noah after school. What she hadn't mentioned was her plan to be present for the CPS meeting. She found Daniel sitting beside Noah's bed, looking marginally better than he had the day before. He'd clearly showered in the hospital facilities, his hair damp and his face clean-shaven, though the borrowed hospital scrubs he wore hung loosely on his frame. Noah was awake, looking pale but alert, watching cartoons on the wall-mounted television. Ms. Collins, the little boy said when he spotted her, his voice raspy but excited. Daddy said you helped me get better. Rebecca smiled, touched that Daniel had mentioned her to his son. The doctors and nurses did all the hard work. I just made sure they knew you needed help. Daniel stood, awkwardness and gratitude warring in his expression. I didn't expect you to actually come. I said I would, Rebecca replied simply. How is he? Much better. Fever's down to 99. Oxygen levels are good. They want to keep him another night to be safe. But Dr. Patel says he's responding well to the antibiotics. That's wonderful news. Rebecca set down the tote bag she'd brought. I have some clothes for you both. Nothing fancy, just clean things to wear. And some books and small toys for Noah. Daniel's pride visibly battled with necessity. Thank you, he said finally. That's really thoughtful. How's Lily doing at school? Rebecca asked, carefully avoiding mentioning her reassignment. A shadow crossed Daniel's face. Actually, that's something I wanted to ask you about. She was confused this morning about being moved to a different class. Said you were still her teacher, but she had to go to a Ms. Peterson. Rebecca sighed. That wasn't my decision. The principal felt it would be better if Lily wasn't in my class, given my involvement with your situation. They're punishing you, Daniel realized, because you helped us. It's more complicated than that, Rebecca hedged. There are protocols I didn't follow, professional boundaries I may have crossed. I'm sorry, Daniel said sincerely. The last thing I wanted was to cause problems for you. You didn't cause anything, Rebecca assured him. I made my own choices. Before Daniel could respond, there was a knock at the door, and a woman entered. In her early 30s, with curly brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and a messenger bag slung across her body. She had the harried look of someone with too many cases and too little time. Mr. Parker? I'm Jade Wilson from Child Protective Services. Her gaze shifted to Rebecca. And you are? Rebecca Collins. I'm Lily's teacher. She didn't elaborate on the recent change to that status. Jade's eyebrows rose slightly. The teacher who found the family. I've read the hospital social worker's report. Her tone was neutral, giving away nothing of her thoughts on Rebecca's involvement. Yes, Rebecca confirmed. I followed Lily when I noticed she was hiding her lunch and discovered their situation. Jade turned her attention back to Daniel. Mr. Parker, I'd like to speak with you privately about your family's circumstances. Standard procedure. Daniel glanced at Rebecca, then at Noah, clearly reluctant to leave his son's side. I can stay with Noah, Rebecca offered. If that's okay with everyone. Jade considered this for a moment. That would be acceptable. We can use the conference room down the hall, Mr. Parker. Daniel knelt beside Noah's bed. Buddy, I need to go talk to this lady for a little while. Ms. Collins is going to stay with you. Okay? Noah nodded, his attention already drifting back to the cartoon on the television. I won't be long, Daniel promised, following Jade from the room. Once they were gone, Rebecca settled into the chair beside Noah's bed. What are you watching? SpongeBob, Noah replied, his eyes fixed on the screen. Daddy says we don't have a TV anymore. We used to have a big one. The simple statement, delivered without self-pity, squeezed Rebecca's heart. Well, you can enjoy this one while you're here, she said lightly. Noah turned his attention to her, surprisingly direct for a 4-year-old. Are you Lily's teacher? Yes, I am. Lily says you're the best teacher ever. Rebecca smiled, though it felt bittersweet now. That's very nice of her to say. Are you going to help us not live in the woods anymore? Noah asked, the question so straightforward it took Rebecca aback. I'm going to try, she answered carefully. There are a lot of people who want to help your family. Noah seemed satisfied with this answer and returned his attention to SpongeBob. Rebecca watched him, noting how despite his illness, there was a resilience to him, the same quiet strength she'd observed in both Lily and Daniel. The Parker family had been bent but not broken by their circumstances. Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from her brother Michael. Got the air mattresses and bedding you asked for. Dropped them off at your place. You sure about this, Becca? She typed back, very sure. Thank you. Michael's response came quickly. Let me know what else they need. And what you need. Love you, sis. Rebecca smiled, grateful for her brother's unconditional support. Unlike many in her life, Michael had never questioned her decision to help the Parkers, had simply asked what he could do to assist. Down the hall, she knew, Daniel was telling his story again. The sudden loss of his wife, the mounting bills, the foreclosure, the desperate measures to keep his children fed and in school. But this time, the listener had the power to keep his family together or tear it apart. Rebecca tried not to dwell on what might be happening in that conference room, focusing instead on Noah, who had dozed off mid-cartoon, his small body finally getting the rest it needed to heal. Nearly an hour passed before the door opened again. Daniel entered first, his expression unreadable. Jade followed, her professional demeanor firmly in place. Noah's sleeping, Rebecca whispered, rising from her chair. Daniel nodded, moving to check on his son. Jade gestured for Rebecca to join her in the hallway. Once outside, Jade spoke in low tones. Mr. Parker has explained the situation in detail. I've also reviewed the hospital social worker's report and spoken with the police officer who responded to the 911 call. And, Rebecca prompted when Jade paused. And I'm recommending temporary placement of both children in emergency foster care while Mr. Parker secures stable housing and employment. Though Rebecca had expected this, hearing it stated so plainly felt like a physical blow. That's not necessary. They shouldn't be separated. It's standard procedure in cases of homelessness with young children, Jade explained, not unkindly. Especially when one child has already experienced a medical emergency potentially exacerbated by their living conditions. But Daniel is a good father, Rebecca insisted. He's not neglectful or abusive. He's a widower who fell on hard times. I don't disagree, Jade said, surprising Rebecca. Mr. Parker clearly loves his children and has made significant efforts to maintain their well-being despite extremely difficult circumstances. But the fact remains that they've been living outdoors, with inadequate shelter, food, and medical care. Because the systems that should have helped them failed, Rebecca argued. He tried the shelters. They were either full or wouldn't accept a single father with children. That's a legitimate issue with our social safety net, Jade acknowledged. One that needs addressing at a policy level. But my immediate concern is the welfare of these specific children right now. Rebecca took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. What if Mr. Parker had immediate access to stable housing? Would that change your recommendation? Jade studied Rebecca's face. Potentially. Stable housing, adequate food, and a clear plan for sustainable income would certainly strengthen his case for maintaining custody. I have a 2-bedroom apartment, Rebecca said, the words coming out in a rush. The spare room is ready for them. It's clean, safe, in a good neighborhood close to the school. They can stay there while Daniel gets back on his feet. Jade's professional expression faltered briefly, replaced by genuine surprise. Ms. Collins, are you offering to house this entire family in your home? Yes. That's highly unusual. These are unusual circumstances, Rebecca countered. Jade shook her head slightly. I appreciate your concern, but such an arrangement raises significant questions about boundaries and appropriate involvement. Is it more appropriate to separate a family that's already suffered the loss of a wife and mother? Rebecca challenged. To place those children with strangers when there's a viable alternative? The foster care system exists precisely for situations like this. The foster care system is overloaded and imperfect, Rebecca interrupted. You know as well as I do that siblings are often separated, that children frequently experience multiple placements, that the trauma of separation can last a lifetime. Jade sighed. Ms. Collins, while I understand your concerns, I have to follow department guidelines. And those guidelines wouldn't typically approve placement with a teacher who has known the family for less than 48 hours. Then change the recommendation, Rebecca pressed. Give Daniel and his children a chance to stay together while he rebuilds their life. It's not that simple. It could be, Rebecca insisted. You have discretion in your recommendations. Use it. Jade was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. Let me ask you something, Miss Collins. Why are you so invested in this particular family? You must have encountered students in difficult situations before. The question caught Rebecca off guard. Why indeed? She taught hundreds of children over her career, many from challenging circumstances. She'd always cared, always done what she could within professional boundaries, but she'd never before offered her home, risked her job, put herself between a family and the systems designed to protect them. I suppose, Rebecca began slowly, I see something of myself in them, in their loss, their grief, the way life can collapse overnight. She met Jade's gaze directly, and I believe they deserve a chance to heal together, not apart. Jade considered this, then nodded slightly. Wait here. She returned to Noah's room, closing the door behind her. Rebecca leaned against the wall, exhaustion suddenly washing over her. She'd been running on adrenaline and determination since yesterday, and the toll was beginning to show. Nearly 20 minutes passed before the door opened again. Daniel emerged first, his expression cautiously hopeful. Jade followed, her professional mask firmly back in place. Ms. Collins, she began formally, I've discussed various options with Mr. Parker, including your unconventional offer of temporary housing. She paused. While I have reservations about the arrangement, I'm willing to recommend a provisional plan that would allow the family to remain together under certain conditions. Rebecca felt a surge of relief. What conditions? First, this would be a temporary arrangement, 60 days maximum, during which Mr. Parker must secure permanent housing and stable employment. Jade turned to Daniel. I'll connect you with rapid rehousing programs and employment resources. Daniel nodded eagerly. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. Second, Jade continued, regular home visits from me or another caseworker to ensure the children's needs are being met and to monitor progress toward independence. Of course, Rebecca agreed. Third, both you and Mr. Parker will need to sign agreements acknowledging the temporary nature of this arrangement and outlining expectations for all parties. Jade's expression softened slightly. And finally, Ms. Collins, I would strongly recommend you seek guidance from the school district regarding this arrangement. Your professional standing could be at risk. I'll handle that, Rebecca assured her, though uncertainty fluttered in her stomach. She'd already been warned by Principal Washburn about overstepping boundaries. This would certainly qualify. Very well, Jade said, opening her messenger bag and removing some forms. I'll need both of you to fill these out. Mr. Parker, this includes authorization for background checks on Ms. Collins as a temporary caregiver, which is standard procedure. As they worked through the paperwork, the reality of what Rebecca had committed to began to sink in. She was bringing a grieving widower and his 2 young children into her home, Strangers, essentially, despite the intense connection she'd felt to their plight. The spare bedroom that had stood empty since John's death would soon house a family in crisis. Was she overstepping? Almost certainly. Was she risking her job? Possibly. Was she following her heart rather than her head? Absolutely. Yet as she signed the final form, Rebecca felt more certain of this decision than of anything she'd done in the 3 years since John's death. "I'll submit these today and expedite the process," Jade said, gathering the completed paperwork. "Assuming everything checks out, which I anticipate it will, Noah can be discharged to Ms. Collins's care tomorrow, and Lily can join them after school." Daniel turned to Rebecca, emotion clear in his eyes. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," she replied simply. "Just focus on rebuilding." Jade stood, slinging her messenger bag over her shoulder. "I'll be in touch tomorrow with the final approval and details for the first home visit. Mr. Parker, I've given you my card with my direct number. Please call if you have any questions or concerns." After she left, a silence fell between Rebecca and Daniel. Noah continued to sleep peacefully, unaware of the arrangements being made on his behalf. "You don't have to do this," Daniel said finally, echoing his earlier text message. "It's too much to ask of anyone, especially someone who barely knows us." "I'm not doing it because you asked," Rebecca pointed out gently. "I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do." Daniel studied her face. "Can I ask why? Really? And don't say it's just because Lily is your student." Rebecca considered her answer carefully. "After my husband died, I shut down a part of myself. I went through the motions, teaching, paying bills, grocery shopping, but I wasn't really living, just existing." She glanced at Noah, then back at Daniel. "When I found you and your children in those woods, something woke up in me, a reminder that there are people who need help, who deserve better than what the world has given them." "So we're your project?" Daniel asked, but there was no bite to the question, just genuine curiosity. Rebecca shook her head. "No, you're people who need a temporary bridge to get from where you are to where you're going. I have the means to be that bridge. It's as simple as that." Daniel didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded. 60 days, he said. "That's how long we have to find our own place, according to the CPS plan. I promise we won't stay a day longer than necessary." "There's no rush," Rebecca assured him. "The important thing is that your family stays together while you rebuild." Daniel's phone chimed with a text message. He checked it, his expression shifting to surprise. "It's from the hospital social worker, Vanessa. She says there's an immediate opening for a maintenance position here at the hospital. Full-time, benefits after 90 days. She's arranged an interview for tomorrow morning." Rebecca smiled. "That's wonderful news." "It's entry-level," Daniel said, clearly tempering his enthusiasm. "Much less than I made running my own contracting business. But it's stable, and the hours would work with the kids' school schedule." "It's a start," Rebecca encouraged. "A foundation to build on." Daniel nodded, returning the phone to his pocket. "I should let you get back to work. You've already done more than enough." "I'll come by after school," Rebecca promised, gathering her purse. "Is there anything you need me to bring?" "You've already brought everything we need," Daniel said softly. "Hope." The simple word, delivered without drama or embellishment, caught Rebecca off guard. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and turned to leave. As she made her way back to her car, Rebecca's phone rang. The caller ID showed the school district's central office. With a deep breath, she answered. "Rebecca Collins speaking." "Ms. Collins, this is Superintendent Hayes. I need to see you in my office immediately regarding your involvement with the Parker family." Rebecca closed her eyes briefly. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Good. And Ms. Collins? I suggest you bring your union representative." The line went dead. Rebecca stood in the hospital parking lot, the autumn sun warm on her face despite the chill in the air. She should have felt anxiety, fear for her job, regret for the complications she'd invited into her life. Instead, she felt something entirely different. Purpose. For the first time in 3 years, Rebecca Collins was fighting for something beyond mere survival, beyond the day-to-day routine that had sustained her after loss. She was fighting for a family, for hope. Whatever consequences awaited her in the superintendent's office, that knowledge would sustain her. The district's central office occupied a former elementary school that had been converted when enrollment numbers declined a decade earlier. The hallways, wider than necessary for adult occupants, still bore the faded outlines of motivational posters long since removed. Rebecca had always found something melancholy about the space. A place designed for children's voices now filled with the quiet hum of administrative work. Superintendent Robert Hayes's office was located in what had once been the school library, a spacious room with high ceilings and tall windows that filled the space with natural light. Unlike Principal Washburn's modern, almost sterile office, Hayes favored a more traditional aesthetic. Heavy wooden furniture, bookshelves lined with educational texts and district memorabilia, framed photographs of various school events throughout his 15-year tenure. Hayes himself sat behind a massive oak desk, his silver hair and trimmed beard giving him a distinguished appearance that matched his surroundings. At 62, he was nearing retirement age, a fact that colored many of his decisions with an eye toward his legacy in the district. Rebecca had opted not to call her union representative, a decision she hoped wouldn't prove foolish. She'd always had a cordial, if distant, relationship with Hayes, who generally allowed principals to handle their staff without interference unless something rose to the level of district concern. Apparently, her involvement with the Parkers had reached that threshold. "Ms. Collins," Hayes greeted her, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Thank you for coming so promptly." "Of course, Superintendent," Rebecca replied, taking the seat. "Though I'm not entirely clear on the urgency." Hayes leaned back slightly, studying her. "I've received concerning reports from both Principal Washburn and the district's legal counsel regarding your involvement with the student's family, specifically the Parker family." Rebecca nodded. "I found Lily Parker's family living in a makeshift shelter behind the school. Her younger brother was seriously ill. I called emergency services and have since been helping them navigate the systems in place to assist families in crisis." "That's a rather sanitized version of events," Hayes observed. "From what I understand, you've offered to house this entire family in your personal residence, after knowing them for less than 2 days." "That's correct," Rebecca acknowledged, seeing no point in denying it. Child Protective Services was planning to place the children in separate foster homes while their father secured housing. I offered an alternative that would keep the family together. Hayes's eyebrows rose. "And you don't see how this might constitute an inappropriate level of involvement with a student's family? A serious breach of professional boundaries?" "I see how it might appear that way," Rebecca conceded. "But these are extraordinary circumstances. The Parkers lost their mother 6 months ago to a sudden heart condition. They subsequently lost their home, their possessions, everything familiar. Separating them now would compound that trauma unnecessarily." "Your concern is admirable," Hayes said, his tone softening slightly. "But there are systems in place to assist families in crisis. Social services, community organizations, churches, all of which failed the Parkers," Rebecca interrupted. "Daniel Parker tried the shelters, applied for assistance, sought help through proper channels. Those systems either couldn't or wouldn't accommodate a single father with 2 young children. That's how they ended up living in the woods behind our school." Hayes was silent for a moment, considering this. "Even so, offering your home crosses a line that places both you and the district in a precarious position." "How so?" Rebecca challenged, more boldly than she might have under other circumstances. "I'm helping a family in need, one that includes my student." "Former student," Hayes corrected. "Principal Washburn informed me that Lily Parker has been reassigned to Ms. Peterson's classroom. A decision made without consulting me or considering what would be best for Lily," Rebecca noted, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from her voice. Hayes sighed. "Rebecca, you've been with this district for 12 years. Your teaching record is exemplary. Your students consistently show excellent progress. No one is questioning your abilities or dedication." He leaned forward. "But this situation raises serious concerns about judgment and boundaries. With respect, Superintendent, sometimes boundaries need to be reassessed when the systems they protect are failing the people they're meant to serve. A flicker of something, irritation, respect, crossed Hayes' face. That's a philosophical position, not a practical one. The district has policies for a reason. They protect students, families, and staff. They mitigate liability. They ensure appropriate relationships between educators and the community we serve. And they failed Lily Parker, Rebecca said quietly. They failed her father and her little brother. Sometimes doing the right thing means stepping outside the lines drawn by policy manuals. Hayes studied her for a long moment. You seem determined to continue down this path, regardless of the professional consequences. I am. Then I need to be clear about what those consequences might entail, Hayes said, his tone grave. The district's legal counsel has advised that your actions could constitute grounds for disciplinary action, up to and including termination. Rebecca felt her stomach drop, though she'd suspected as much. On what grounds, specifically? Breach of professional boundaries. Failure to follow mandatory reporting protocols. Unauthorized contact with the student's family outside school hours and property. Potential conflict of interest regarding a student in your care. Former student, Rebecca corrected, using his own words against him. According to Principal Washburn. Hayes almost smiled. Indeed, a decision made precisely because of your inappropriate level of involvement. Rebecca took a deep breath. Superintendent Hayes, I understand the district's position. I really do. But I also understand what's at stake for this family. Noah Parker nearly died because they had nowhere safe to go. Lily has been going hungry to feed her father and brother. They've already lost their mother, their home, everything familiar. I have the means to help them stay together while they rebuild. How could I possibly turn away from that? Not every problem is yours to solve, Rebecca, Hayes said, his tone gentler than before. Not every family in crisis is your responsibility. This one is, Rebecca said simply. I found them. I made a promise to help. I intend to keep it. Hayes sighed deeply, removing his glasses and pinching the bridge of his nose. A gesture reminiscent of Principal Washburn earlier that day. I had a feeling you'd say that. He replaced his glasses and reached for a folder on his desk. Which is why I've prepared this. He slid the folder across to Rebecca, who opened it cautiously. Inside was a formal document titled, Leave of Absence Request. What is this? She asked, though the title was self-explanatory. A compromise, Hayes explained. Take a leave of absence, unpaid, unfortunately, as you don't have sufficient sick days accumulated for 60 days. The same time frame as the CPS arrangement you've established with the Parker family. During this time, you can focus on helping them transition without the complications of maintaining your teaching responsibilities or navigating the ethical concerns your arrangement presents. Rebecca stared at the document, conflicting emotions washing over her. The practical part of her brain immediately calculated the financial impact. 2 months without pay would be difficult, though not impossible thanks to John's life insurance and her careful saving habits. The teacher in her mourned the thought of leaving her students mid-year, especially without a proper goodbye. But the part of her that had made a promise to the Parkers recognized the wisdom in Hayes' suggestion. And after the 60 days? She asked. Assuming there are no further complications or boundary issues, you would return to your teaching position, Hayes said. The written warning from Principal Washburn would remain in your file, but no further disciplinary action would be taken. And if I refuse? Hayes' expression turned grave. Then we proceed with a formal investigation into your conduct, which could result in suspension or termination. It wasn't really a choice, Rebecca realized, and perhaps that was for the best. She hadn't fully considered how she would balance her teaching responsibilities with helping the Parkers navigate their crisis. What about my students? She asked. We'll bring in a long-term substitute, Hayes replied. Ms. Peterson will continue with Lily, as already arranged. Your other students will be told you're taking a temporary leave for personal reasons. Rebecca nodded slowly. May I have some time to consider this? Until tomorrow morning, Hayes said. I'll need your decision by 9 a.m. I understand. Rebecca closed the folder and stood, Thank you for offering an alternative, Superintendent. Hayes rose as well, his expression softening slightly. For what it's worth, Rebecca, I admire your commitment to this family. It speaks to your character. I just wish it hadn't created such a complicated situation for everyone involved. Rebecca managed a small smile. The right thing is rarely the easy thing. Indeed, Hayes agreed. I hope your intervention proves worth the professional risk you're taking. So do I, Rebecca admitted, turning to leave. And Rebecca? Hayes called as she reached the door. Whatever you decide, be careful. Boundaries exist not just to protect students from teachers, but also to protect teachers from becoming too emotionally invested in situations they can't control. The warning lingered in Rebecca's mind as she drove from the district office back to the hospital. Hayes was right. She had allowed herself to become deeply invested in the Parker situation in a remarkably short time. Was she overstepping? Certainly. Was she risking her career? Absolutely. Was it the right thing to do? Of that, at least she remained certain. By the time she reached Noah's hospital room, she had made her decision. Daniel looked up from the book he was reading to Noah when Rebecca entered the room, surprise evident on his face. You're back, he said, closing the book, one of those Rebecca had brought earlier. I had some things to take care of at the district office, she explained, setting her purse down and smiling at Noah, who was looking considerably better. How's our patient doing? Much better, Daniel replied. Doctor says his lungs are clearing nicely. If his fever stays down, we can leave tomorrow. That's wonderful news, Rebecca said, settling into the visitor's chair. Has Jade from CPS been back? No, but she called. All the paperwork's being processed. She said we're provisionally approved to stay with you while He hesitated, glancing at Noah. While I get things sorted out. Rebecca nodded, understanding his reluctance to discuss their homelessness in front of Noah. I've been making arrangements on my end too. My brother brought over some air mattresses and bedding, and I've cleared space in the spare room. It's not fancy, but it will be comfortable. It's more than we deserve, Daniel said quietly. I still can't believe you're doing this. Daddy, can I have more juice? Noah interrupted, holding out an empty cup. Sure, buddy. Daniel rose, taking the cup to the small sink in the corner of the room to rinse and refill it. Rebecca took the opportunity to study him more closely. Though still gaunt from weeks of inadequate nutrition, there was a new energy in his movements, a spark of hope that hadn't been there the day before. The difference was subtle but significant, the shift from mere survival to possibility. Here you go, champ, Daniel said, handing Noah the refilled cup. Small sips, remember? Noah nodded seriously, taking a careful drink before setting the cup on his tray table. Can we go to Ms. Rebecca's house tomorrow? Daniel glanced at Rebecca, who nodded encouragingly. That's the plan, he told his son. You, me, and Lily will stay with Ms. Rebecca for a little while until we find our own place. Will there be a TV? Noah asked hopefully. Daniel laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. That's not the most important thing, buddy. There is a TV, Rebecca confirmed, smiling at Noah's transparent priorities. And books, and a nice park nearby. What about my dinosaurs? Noah asked, turning to his father. Did they stay in our old house? A shadow crossed Daniel's face. Remember we talked about this, buddy? Our things from the old house are gone now, but we'll get new dinosaurs soon. Noah's lower lip trembled slightly. I miss my T-Rex. And my Triceratops. I know, buddy. Daniel stroked his son's hair gently. I miss them too. Rebecca felt her heart constrict at the exchange. Another reminder of all this family had lost. Material possessions were just things, as Daniel had said yesterday, but to a 4-year-old, those dinosaurs represented security, normalcy, home. You know, she said casually, I think there might be a toy store near my apartment. Maybe we could stop there on the way home from the hospital tomorrow. Daniel shot her a warning look. Rebecca, you don't need to. Just to pick up a few essentials, she continued, ignoring his protest. Every boy needs at least one dinosaur. Wouldn't you agree, Noah? Noah nodded vigorously, his earlier sadness forgotten. T-Rex is the best. Then T-Rex it is, Rebecca promised, meeting Daniel's gaze steadily when he tried again to object. My treat. Daniel sighed, clearly torn between pride and his son's happiness. We can discuss it later, he said quietly. Rebecca nodded, acknowledging the conversation wasn't over. She understood his reluctance to accept charity, especially in front of his children. His dignity had already taken enough hits. Has Lily called? She asked, changing the subject. No, but the school nurse brought her by at lunch, Daniel replied. Part of the arrangement with CPS. She's allowed to visit Noah as long as school staff accompanies her. How was she? Daniel's expression clouded. Confused. Upset about changing classes. She kept asking if she did something wrong. If you didn't want to be her teacher anymore. Rebecca winced. I'm so sorry. I should have explained it better this morning. The change wasn't my choice. I tried to tell her that, Daniel assured her. But she's 7. All she knows is that everything in her life keeps changing, and not for the better. I'll talk to her, Rebecca promised. Make sure she understands it's not her fault, not something she did wrong. Thank you, Daniel said sincerely. She thinks the world of you, you know, even before all this. She was always coming home talking about Ms. Collins said this and Ms. Collins showed us that. Emma used to tease her about having a teacher crush. The mention of Emma, casual, unplanned, seemed to surprise Daniel himself. He fell silent, his gaze dropping to his hands. She sounds like a wonderful mother, Rebecca said gently. Daniel nodded, not looking up. She was. Patient, kind, funny. The kids were her world. He swallowed hard. I keep thinking she would know what to do now. How to fix all of this. You're doing the best you can, Rebecca assured him. And you're not alone anymore. He looked up at that, his eyes searching hers. No, I suppose I'm not. He straightened in his chair, visibly pulling himself together. Speaking of which, I have that job interview at the hospital tomorrow morning. The maintenance position. That's great, Rebecca encouraged. When? 9 a.m. I'll need to look presentable somehow. He gestured ruefully at his borrowed hospital scrubs. Not exactly interview attire. I can help with that, Rebecca offered. My brother is about your size. I can ask him to loan you some clothes. Nothing fancy, but clean and professional. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. That would be really helpful. Noah, who had been quietly playing with the controls on his hospital bed, suddenly looked up. Is Lily coming back today? Not until tomorrow, buddy, Daniel told him. She has to go to school, remember? But where will she sleep tonight? Noah asked, his young face creased with worry. Not in the woods by herself? Daniel exchanged a glance with Rebecca, clearly uncertain how to explain the complicated arrangements to a 4-year-old. Lily will stay with a very nice family tonight, Rebecca explained gently. Just for one night. Then tomorrow, after you get out of the hospital, you'll all come to my house together. Promise? Noah asked, his eyes serious. I promise, Rebecca assured him. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. A nurse entered, carrying a tray with Noah's dinner. Time for some nutrition, she announced cheerfully, setting the tray on the table. And then we need to check vitals and give another round of antibiotics. I should go, Rebecca said, gathering her purse. Let you have dinner and rest. Daniel walked her to the door. Thank you for coming back, he said quietly. For everything, really. I'll see you tomorrow, Rebecca promised. Try to get some rest yourself. Ms. Rebecca? Noah called from his bed. Are you coming back tomorrow too? First thing in the morning, she assured him. We have a dinosaur to buy, remember? Noah grinned, the first full smile she'd seen from him. T-Rex. T-Rex? She agreed, returning his smile before slipping out the door. In the hallway, Rebecca paused, leaning against the wall as the events of the day caught up with her. The meeting with Principal Washburn, the CPS arrangement, Superintendent Hayes's ultimatum. It was overwhelming. And tomorrow would bring even more changes, more challenges. As the Parkers moved into her home and she formally requested her leave of absence, her phone vibrated with a text message from Michael. Just dropped off clothes at your place as requested. Shirt, tie, slacks for the dad. You sure about all this, Becca? Rebecca typed her response. More sure than I've been about anything in a long time. Thank you for not questioning it. His reply came quickly. That's what big brothers are for. Need anything else? Rebecca considered for a moment, then typed, yes, a T-Rex dinosaur toy. The good kind that roars. For a 4-year-old boy who lost all his toys. The response was almost immediate. Consider it done. We'll drop off tonight. Love you, sis. Rebecca smiled, pocketing her phone and heading toward the elevator. Whatever doubts Superintendent Hayes or Principal Washburn might have about her judgment, whatever professional consequences she might face, she knew in her heart she was doing the right thing. As she drove home in the gathering dusk, Rebecca found herself thinking of John. What would he have thought of all this? Of her bringing a grieving family into their home, risking her career, crossing professional boundaries she'd always carefully maintained? She could almost hear his voice, the gentle teasing tone he'd use when she was overthinking things. Always the rescuer. Becca never could walk past someone in trouble. It had been one of the things he'd loved about her, he'd claimed. Her inability to look away when someone was suffering, her compulsion to help, to fix, to make things better. After his death, that part of her had withered. Grief had turned her inward, focused her energy on simply surviving each day without him. Teaching had become her refuge, her students the only ones she allowed herself to care about, and even then only within the safe confines of her classroom. Until Lily Parker had hidden her lunch in her purple backpack. Until Rebecca had followed her into the woods and found a family that needed exactly what she had to give. A safe harbor, a temporary bridge between loss and rebuilding. As she pulled into her apartment complex, Rebecca felt a sense of certainty settle over her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would be many, she had made the right choice. For the Parkers, yes, but perhaps equally importantly for herself. For the first time in 3 years, Rebecca Collins was fully alive again. Heart open to the messy, complicated, beautiful risk of caring deeply about someone else's pain. It felt, in a way she couldn't quite articulate, like coming home. The next morning dawned clear and cold. A perfect late October day with leaves crunching underfoot and breath visible in the crisp air. Rebecca arrived at the hospital at 8:15, carrying a garment bag with the clothes Michael had loaned for Daniel's interview. She found him in Noah's room, freshly showered but still wearing hospital scrubs, reading to his son from one of the books she'd brought yesterday. Good morning, she greeted them, hanging the garment bag on the bathroom door. How's our patient today? No fever, Noah announced proudly. Doctor said I can go home. That's wonderful news, Rebecca said, genuinely pleased. And perfect timing, since your dad has an important meeting this morning. Daniel glanced at the garment bag. Are those? From my brother, Rebecca confirmed. Everything you should need for an interview. He's a bit taller than you, but the pants should be close enough. Thank you, Daniel said, the simple phrase laden with deeper gratitude. For thinking of everything. Rebecca smiled. That's what friends do. The word hung between them, friends. Was that what they were becoming? The relationship had evolved so quickly from teacher and parent to something more complex, more personal. The interview's at 9? Rebecca asked, checking her watch. Daniel nodded, looking nervous. In the administration wing, the hospital HR director. You'll do great, Rebecca encouraged. They'd be lucky to have you. It's been a while since I've interviewed for anything, Daniel admitted. I've been self-employed for nearly a decade. Just be honest, Rebecca advised. About your skills, your situation, your willingness to work hard. That's all anyone can ask. Daniel nodded, then gestured toward the bathroom. I should get ready. Of course, Rebecca said. I'll stay with Noah. While Daniel changed, Rebecca settled in the chair beside Noah's bed. Are you excited to leave the hospital today? Noah nodded vigorously. Hospitals are boring. Except for the pudding. Rebecca laughed. The pudding is pretty good. I'll give you that. Will Lily be at your house when we get there? Noah asked. Not right away, Rebecca explained. She has school today, but she'll come after school is finished. I miss her, Noah said simply. I know you do, Rebecca replied, her heart aching for this little boy who'd experienced so much upheaval. But you'll see her very soon. The bathroom door opened, and Daniel emerged transformed. Michael's charcoal slacks and light blue button-down shirt fit reasonably well, and the navy tie completed the professional look. He'd managed to tame his hair and beard, which Rebecca suspected he'd trimmed with hospital scissors. How do I look? He asked, self-consciously adjusting the tie. Very handsome, Daddy, Noah declared. I agree, Rebecca said, noting how the proper clothes emphasized the natural dignity in Daniel's bearing. Despite weeks of hardship, there was something resilient in his posture, a quiet strength that no amount of adversity had managed to break. Daniel checked his watch. I should head down. The interview's in 20 minutes. Go, Rebecca encouraged. We'll be fine here. Noah and I have some very important dinosaur discussions planned. Daniel smiled, leaning down to kiss Noah's forehead. Be good for Ms. Rebecca. Okay? I'll be back soon. Good luck, Daddy, Noah called as Daniel headed for the door. You've got this, Rebecca added softly. After he left, Noah turned to Rebecca with the direct gaze of a child who had something important to say. Is my daddy going to get a job? I hope so, Rebecca answered honestly. He's very good at fixing things. Noah nodded, accepting this. Our house broke. Daddy couldn't fix it. The simple statement, delivered without self-pity, squeezed Rebecca's heart. Some things are too big for one person to fix alone, she explained gently. That's why people help each other. Like you're helping us? Exactly like that, Rebecca confirmed. Noah seemed satisfied with this explanation and returned his attention to the cartoon playing on the television. Rebecca watched him, marveling at the resilience of children, their ability to adapt, to accept, to find normalcy in even the most chaotic circumstances. A nurse entered to check Noah's vitals one last time and remove his four. Dr. Patel followed shortly after, reviewing his chart and declaring him ready for discharge. The antibiotics have worked wonders, she told Rebecca. We'll send him home with oral medication to continue for another week. He should be fine as long as he gets plenty of rest and fluids. We'll make sure of it, Rebecca promised. Dr. Patel gave her a curious look. The social worker mentioned you're providing temporary housing for the family? That's right, Rebecca confirmed, slightly defensive. Dr. Patel nodded, her expression neutral. It's good they have support. Too many families fall through the cracks in our systems. Before Rebecca could respond, Daniel returned, his expression unreadable. How did it go? She asked anxiously. A slow smile spread across his face. I got it. I start Monday. Daddy, Noah exclaimed, clapping his hands. That's wonderful, Rebecca said, genuinely delighted. Congratulations. It's entry-level, like I said, Daniel explained, his voice tinged with both relief and lingering pride. But it's full-time, benefits after 90 days, and the hours work with the kids' schedules. 7 to 3:30, Monday through Friday. It's perfect, Rebecca assured him. A solid foundation to build on. Dr. Patel smiled, making a final note in Noah's chart. Congratulations, Mr. Parker. The hospital maintenance team is excellent. You'll be in good company. Thank you, Daniel replied, his gratitude clearly extending beyond the doctor's words to the care she'd provided Noah. I'll have the nurse bring in the discharge paperwork and prescription, Dr. Patel said, moving toward the door. Noah should be good to go within the hour. After she left, Daniel sank into the chair beside Noah's bed, as though his legs could no longer support him. The emotion of the moment, the job offer, Noah's recovery, the imminent change in their circumstances, seemed to overwhelm him briefly. We're going to be okay, he whispered, more to himself than to Rebecca or Noah. We're really going to be okay. Rebecca placed a hand on his shoulder, a simple gesture of support. Yes, she agreed softly. You are. The discharge process took another hour, with nurses providing care instructions, medications, and follow-up appointment information. By mid-morning, they were wheeling Noah out of the hospital, the little boy insisting he could walk but hospital policy requiring the wheelchair. In the parking lot, Rebecca led them to her car, where she'd already installed a booster seat for Noah, another item Michael had dropped off the night before. Daniel helped Noah in, buckling him securely before sliding into the passenger seat beside Rebecca. Next stop, Rebecca announced as she started the car, dinosaur acquisition. Noah cheered from the back seat. Daniel started to protest, but Rebecca silenced him with a look. "It's one toy," she said quietly. "Let me do this." Daniel relented with a small nod, though she could tell it cost him something to accept even this simple kindness. They stopped at a small toy store in a strip mall near Rebecca's apartment. Noah's eyes widened as they entered, taking in the colorful displays of toys, likely the first normal, child-oriented environment he'd experienced in weeks. "Dinosaurs are in the back," the clerk told them, smiling at Noah's obvious excitement. They followed Noah as he made his way to the dinosaur section, his steps growing stronger and more confident with each passing hour away from the hospital. Rebecca noticed Daniel watching his son with a mixture of joy and lingering worry, the expression of a parent who had come too close to losing something precious. "Look, Daddy," Noah exclaimed, pointing to a large T-Rex figure with realistic details and moving parts. "It's just like my old one." Daniel knelt beside his son. "It's pretty close, buddy. Maybe even better." Noah reached for the toy hesitantly, as though afraid it might disappear. "Can I really have it?" "Yes," Rebecca and Daniel said simultaneously, exchanging a small smile at their synchronicity. Noah hugged the dinosaur to his chest, pure happiness radiating from his face. "Thank you, Ms. Rebecca." "You're very welcome," she replied, her throat tight with emotion. As they approached the register, Daniel whispered to Rebecca, "Just the one. Okay? We can't start this arrangement with me letting you buy everything they want." "Agreed," Rebecca whispered back. "Just the essentials." One dinosaur is definitely essential. After paying for the toy, they continued to Rebecca's apartment, a modest two-bedroom unit in a well-maintained complex about a mile from the school. Rebecca felt a sudden nervousness as she unlocked the door, seeing her home through new eyes. Would it feel too small for 4 people? Too personal? Too filled with reminders of John? "Here we are," she said, pushing the door open. "Home for the next little while." Noah entered first, clutching his dinosaur, his eyes wide as he took in the unfamiliar space. Daniel followed more hesitantly, his expression carefully neutral as he surveyed what would be their temporary shelter. Rebecca's apartment was comfortable rather than stylish, worn leather furniture. Bookcases filled with paperbacks, framed photographs, and botanical prints on the walls. The hardwood floors were partially covered with area rugs in warm colors, and large windows filled the space with natural light. "It's beautiful," Daniel said quietly, his eyes taking in details. The coffee mug on the side table, the throw blanket draped over the armchair, the small collection of succulents on the windowsill, the intimate markers of someone's life. "It's not fancy," Rebecca demurred, "but it's comfortable. Let me show you where you'll be staying." She led them down the short hallway to the spare bedroom, which she transformed over the past 2 days. Gone were John's boxes and the accumulated items of her widowhood. In their place were 2 air mattresses, a queen size for Daniel and a smaller one for the children, made up with fresh linens and pillows. She'd cleared space in the closet and dresser, set up a small desk in the corner with paper and colored pencils, added a nightlight shaped like a star. "This is for us?" Noah asked, clearly impressed by what seemed to him a luxurious arrangement. "All yours," Rebecca confirmed. "The bathroom is right across the hall. I've put towels and toiletries in there for you." Daniel stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Rebecca, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," she assured him. "It's just temporary, remember? A bridge to get you from where you were to where you're going." He nodded, though something in his eyes suggested he was struggling with more complex emotions than simple gratitude. "Thank you for all of this." Rebecca smiled. "Why don't you get settled while I make some lunch? Noah must be hungry after hospital food." Peanut butter and jelly? Noah asked hopefully. I think I can manage that, Rebecca laughed, heading to the kitchen. As she prepared a simple lunch, Rebecca could hear Noah chattering excitedly to his father about the room, the dinosaur, the prospect of Lily joining them later. Daniel's responses were quieter, but she could hear the relief and warmth in his voice, the sound of a father beginning to believe that the worst might truly be behind them. Rebecca placed 3 sandwiches on plates, adding apple slices and carrot sticks, and called them to the table. As they ate, Noah regaled them with dinosaur facts, his energy seemingly restored by the combination of medical care, proper food, and the security of having both his father and a safe place to sleep. After lunch, Rebecca suggested Noah rest on the couch with a movie, another luxury the boy had clearly missed. As he settled in with his dinosaur and a blanket, Rebecca gestured for Daniel to join her on the small balcony off the living room. I wanted to tell you, she said once they were alone, that I'm taking a leave of absence from teaching, starting today. Daniel's expression registered surprise. Because of us? Partly, Rebecca admitted. The superintendent offered it as an alternative to formal disciplinary action. But it's also practical. This arrangement will work better if I'm here to help with logistics, especially in these early days. They're punishing you, Daniel said, echoing his words from the hospital, for helping us. They're protecting themselves from liability, Rebecca corrected gently, and maybe giving me space to focus on this commitment I've made without compromising my professional responsibilities. Daniel leaned against the railing, looking out at the view of the neighborhood park across the street. How long? 60 days. The same as our arrangement with CPS. He was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. You're sacrificing a lot. Your job, your income, your privacy, for people you barely know. I'm not sacrificing my job, Rebecca clarified. I'll return after the leave. As for the rest, she shrugged. Sometimes you just know when something is the right thing to do, even if it doesn't make sense on paper. Daniel turned to face her. Why us? Rebecca? Really? There must have been other students over the years, other families in trouble. Rebecca considered the question, wanting to give him an honest answer. When my husband died, she began slowly, people helped me in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Friends, family, even colleagues I barely knew. They brought food, handled paperwork, sat with me when I couldn't bear to be alone. She paused. But even with all that support, there were days I wasn't sure I'd survive the loss. And I was just one person, grieving. You're trying to hold together an entire family while processing your own grief. She met his gaze directly. So yes, there have been other students, other families, but none that resonated with me the way yours did. None that made me feel like I had something specifically useful to offer. Daniel nodded, seeming to accept this explanation. I just need you to know that we won't stay a minute longer than necessary. I'm going to find us a place as quickly as possible. There's no rush, Rebecca assured him. 60 days is the agreement, but if you need more time, we won't, Daniel said firmly. You've already done more than enough, more than anyone could expect. Rebecca recognized his pride, his need to reassert control over his family's situation after weeks of helplessness. All right, she agreed, but know that you're welcome here for as long as you need. They were interrupted by the sound of Rebecca's phone ringing inside. She excused herself to answer it, finding Jade from CPS on the other end. Ms. Collins? I'm calling to confirm the arrangements for Lily Parker. The school has been notified that she should be released to you after classes today. I'll need to schedule our first home visit for tomorrow, if that's acceptable. Of course, Rebecca agreed. Whatever time works for you. 10 a.m., Jade replied. And Ms. Collins? I want to emphasize that this arrangement remains provisional pending my evaluation of the living situation. I understand, Rebecca assured her. We'll be ready for your visit tomorrow. After ending the call, Rebecca returned to the balcony to find Daniel watching Noah through the sliding glass door, a complex mixture of emotions playing across his face. That was Jade from CPS, she told him. I'll pick Lily up from school today, and Jade will visit tomorrow morning to evaluate the living arrangement. Daniel nodded, his expression turning anxious. What if she decides this isn't suitable after all? She won't, Rebecca said confidently. Noah has a clean, safe place to sleep, access to proper nutrition and medical care. You have a job starting Monday. Lily will continue her education without interruption. Those are all the markers they look for. I hope you're right, Daniel said softly. I can't lose them. Not after everything else. You won't? Rebecca promised, the same assurance she'd given multiple times over the past 2 days. We'll make sure of it. Inside, Noah had fallen asleep on the couch, his dinosaur clutched against his chest. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting a golden glow over the living room. For the first time in weeks, the little boy's face was completely relaxed in sleep, free from the tension of uncertainty and fear that had become his constant companions. Daniel watched his son through the glass, his own face reflecting both relief and lingering disbelief at their changed circumstances. I keep waiting to wake up, he admitted quietly, to find ourselves back in that tent. Noah sick, Lily hungry, no way out. This is real, Rebecca assured him. You're safe. Your children are safe. And together, we're going to rebuild what you've lost. Daniel turned to her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to, Rebecca said simply. Just focus on healing. All of you. As they stood together on the balcony, watching Noah sleep peacefully beyond the glass, Rebecca felt a sense of rightness settle over her. Whatever complications her decision had created, professional, financial, personal, this moment confirmed its wisdom. A family that had been on the brink of shattering was beginning to mend. And somehow, in helping them heal, Rebecca was finding pieces of herself she'd thought lost forever in the aftermath of her own grief. It wasn't conventional. It wasn't without risk. But it was, without question, exactly where she was meant to be. 3 weeks had passed since the Parkers had moved into Rebecca's apartment. October had given way to November, bringing shorter days and a persistent chill that painted frost on the windows each morning. Inside the apartment, however, warmth prevailed, not just from the heating system but from the gradual transformation of 4 separate lives into a functioning household. Rebecca stood at the kitchen counter, preparing lunches for Lily and Noah. Daniel had left for work an hour earlier, his shifts at the hospital maintenance department starting promptly at 7. In just 3 weeks, he'd already earned praise from his supervisor for his thoroughness and problem-solving skills. The steady income, while modest, had allowed him to begin rebuilding their financial foundation, setting aside small amounts toward future housing and replacing essential items lost in the foreclosure. Lily, 5 minutes until we leave for school, Rebecca called down the hallway. She'd settled into a routine of taking Lily to school each morning, using the opportunity to check in with her colleagues and maintain some connection to her professional life during her leave of absence. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed in jeans and a purple sweater, her backpack slung over one shoulder. At 7, she carried herself with a seriousness beyond her years, a lingering effect of the responsibilities she'd shouldered during their time of crisis. Is my dad going to pick me up today? She asked, accepting the lunch bag Rebecca handed her. That's the plan, Rebecca confirmed. He finishes at 3:30, so he should be at the pickup line by 3:45. Lily nodded, adding the lunch to her backpack. In the 3 weeks since their living arrangement began, she'd adjusted with remarkable resilience. After initial confusion about Rebecca's role, no longer her teacher but not quite a parent, she'd settled into treating her with a blend of respect and growing affection. Is Noah still sleeping? Rebecca asked, packing her own bag with the papers from the housing assistance program she planned to review during Lily's school hours. He's playing with dinosaurs in our room, Lily reported. He says his throat hurts again. Rebecca frowned slightly. Noah had been battling a lingering cough since his hospitalization for pneumonia. Dr. Patel had assured them it was normal for recovery to take time, especially considering his weakened state before treatment. But Rebecca and Daniel both watched him carefully for any signs of relapse. I'll check on him before we go, Rebecca promised, heading down the hallway. She found Noah sitting on his air mattress, surrounded by an impressive collection of dinosaur figures. The original T-Rex had been joined by several others, gifts from Michael and a few of Rebecca's colleagues who had rallied to support her unconventional living arrangement. "Good morning, paleontologist," she greeted him. "Lily says your throat is sore?" Noah nodded, his dark eyes serious. "It hurts when I swallow." Rebecca sat beside him, feeling his forehead with the back of her hand. "No fever," which was reassuring. "Open up and say, 'Ah,' for me?" Noah complied, allowing Rebecca to check his throat, which looked slightly red but not alarming. "I think it's just a little irritation from your cough," she told him. "How about some warm tea with honey before Lily and I leave?" "With the special honey?" Noah asked hopefully, referring to the lavender honey Rebecca had introduced him to. "Absolutely the special honey," Rebecca confirmed, helping him gather his dinosaurs. "You can bring T-Rex to the kitchen if you want." Noah selected his favorite figure and followed Rebecca to the kitchen, where Lily was already pouring cereal for herself. In these small domestic moments, Rebecca sometimes found herself pausing, struck by how quickly their lives had intertwined. 3 weeks ago, they had been strangers connected only by Lily's presence in her classroom. Now, they moved around each other with the familiar rhythms of family life. As Rebecca prepared Noah's tea, her phone buzzed with a text message from Daniel. "Maintenance emergency in radiology. Might be late for pickup. Can you get Lily if I can't make it?" Rebecca replied quickly. "No problem. Just let me know by 3 o'clock if you need me to get her." His response came immediately. "Thanks. How's Noah's cough?" Rebecca glanced at Noah, who was carefully adding honey to his tea, his tongue between his teeth in concentration. "Sore throat this morning but no fever. Keeping an eye on it." She set her phone aside, aware of the time. "Lily, finish up. We need to leave in 2 minutes." Lily quickly ate the last of her cereal and rinsed her bowl in the sink, a routine she'd established without prompting. Rebecca had noticed that both Parker children had an unusual self-sufficiency, born of necessity during their time of hardship. "Noah, Miss Julia from next door will check on you at lunchtime while I'm at my meeting," Rebecca reminded him, referring to the retired teacher who lived in the adjacent apartment and had offered to help with childcare. "Be sure to answer the door when she knocks. Okay?" Noah nodded solemnly. "I'll be good, Ms. Rebecca." "You're always good," she assured him, dropping a kiss on the top of his head, a gesture that had become natural over the past weeks. "We'll be back before you know it." After final preparations, Rebecca and Lily headed out to the car. The November morning was crisp, their breath forming small clouds in the air as they walked through the parking lot. "Ms. Rebecca?" Lily asked as they drove toward Oakwood Elementary. "Is my dad going to find us a new house soon?" Rebecca glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "He's working on it. The housing assistance program is helping us look for something that will work for your family." "I like living with you," Lily said simply. "Noah does too." Rebecca smiled, touched by the child's directness. "I like having you all there too. But your dad wants you to have your own place again. That's important to him." "Because of his pride?" Lily asked with surprising insight. "Partly," Rebecca acknowledged, impressed by Lily's perception. "And partly because he wants to take care of you and Noah himself. That's his job as your dad." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing this. "But sometimes grown-ups need help too, right? That's what you told Noah." "That's absolutely right," Rebecca agreed. "Everyone needs help sometimes. Your dad is accepting help now so that he can be stronger for you and Noah later." This explanation seemed to satisfy Lily, who turned her attention to the school building as they arrived. Rebecca pulled into the drop-off lane, aware of the curious glances from other teachers supervising morning arrival. Though she'd explained her situation to her closest colleagues, rumors and speculation had inevitably spread through the school community. "Have a great day," Rebecca told Lily as she gathered her backpack. "Remember, your dad or I will be in the pickup lane this afternoon." "Bye, Ms. Rebecca," Lily replied, climbing out of the car. "Tell Noah I'll help him build a dinosaur city when I get home." Rebecca watched Lily walk toward the building, noting how she held her head higher these days, how her steps were more confident. The improvement in the child's demeanor over just 3 weeks was remarkable, evidence of how profoundly housing insecurity had affected her. As Rebecca prepared to pull away, she noticed Principal Washburn standing near the entrance, observing the morning drop-off. Their eyes met briefly, Washburn's expression unreadable, before she deliberately turned away. The relationship between them had cooled considerably since Rebecca's decision to take leave and house the Parkers. Rebecca sighed as she drove out of the school grounds. The professional consequences of her choice had been significant. Though her job was secured for her return in January, she knew she'd face ongoing scrutiny and probably some resentment from administration. The thought troubled her less than it once might have. Some things, she discovered, were worth the professional risk. She drove to a coffee shop near the apartment, planning to review housing assistance documents before her meeting with the program coordinator at noon. Daniel had been reluctant to apply for assistance at first, his pride still raw from their months of struggle, but had finally agreed when Rebecca framed it as a temporary step towards self-sufficiency. The coffee shop was quiet at mid-morning, populated mainly by remote workers with laptops and a few retirees reading newspapers. Rebecca ordered a latte and settled at a corner table, spreading out the paperwork. The housing program offered subsidized apartments for families in transition, with rent based on income and resources to help with security deposits and utility connections. If approved, the Parkers could potentially move into their own place before Christmas. Rebecca felt a complicated mix of emotions at this prospect. On a practical level, she knew it was the right progression. Daniel needed to reestablish independence for himself and his children. On a personal level, however, she'd grown accustomed to their presence in her home, to the sounds of children's laughter-filling spaces that had been silent for too long. "Rebecca Collins? Is that you?" The voice pulled Rebecca from her thoughts. She looked up to find Moira Henderson standing beside her table, designer handbag hanging from one arm, diamond tennis bracelet catching the light as she adjusted her camel-colored coat. "Moira," Rebecca acknowledged, instinctively gathering the housing documents into a neat pile. "How are you?" "I'm well," Moira replied, her gaze drifting to the paperwork before returning to Rebecca's face. "I heard you were on leave. Some kind of personal situation." The barely disguised curiosity in her tone made Rebecca wary. Moira Henderson was not only a prominent parent at Oakwood Elementary, where her twin sons attended 4th grade, but also a member of the school board and, Rebecca had recently learned, the loan officer who had handled the Parkers' foreclosure. "Just taking some time for family matters," Rebecca answered vaguely. "How are Andrew and Alexander doing?" "Thriving," Moira replied with the practiced smile of a woman accustomed to projecting perfection. "They miss having Miss Peterson for reading enrichment. Apparently, she's been reassigned to a regular classroom." The implication hung in the air. Rebecca's absence had created disruption beyond her own classroom. "I'm sure Miss Peterson is doing an excellent job wherever she's assigned," Rebecca said diplomatically. "She's one of our most adaptable teachers." Moira nodded, making no move to leave. "I understand you've taken in that homeless family? The Parkers? The ones with the little girl who was in your class?" Rebecca tensed, aware that their conversation had shifted into potentially dangerous territory. "The Parkers are staying with me temporarily while they secure permanent housing. Yes." "How charitable of you," Moira remarked, her tone making the words sound less than complimentary, though some might question the professional ethics of such an arrangement. "I'm on leave precisely to avoid any conflict of interest," Rebecca pointed out mildly, "and the arrangement has been approved by Child Protective Services." "Still, it's rather unconventional," Moira persisted, "especially given the circumstances of their homelessness." Rebecca looked at her directly. "What do you mean by that?" Moira's perfect eyebrows rose slightly. "Only that from what I understand, Mr. Parker made some unfortunate financial decisions after his wife's death. The foreclosure was the inevitable result of months of non-payment." The casual dismissal of the Parkers' tragedy as unfortunate financial decisions sparked a flare of anger in Rebecca. His wife died unexpectedly, leaving massive medical bills. He was trying to care for 2 young children alone while grieving. "Those aren't unfortunate decisions, Moira. That's life dealing someone an impossible hand." "Nevertheless," Moira continued, seemingly unaffected by Rebecca's defense, "the bank has obligations to its shareholders. We can't make exceptions based on personal circumstances, however tragic. Rebecca repeated, something clicking into place. You were directly involved in their foreclosure. Moira adjusted her bracelet again, a nervous tell that belied her composed expression. I'm a senior loan officer at First Capital Bank. I oversee the mortgage department. So yes, technically, I would have been aware of the foreclosure. Rebecca studied Moira's face, noting the slight discomfort behind her polished veneer. The Parkers' house on Maple Street was sold within weeks of the foreclosure, wasn't it? Well below market value, from what I understand. I wouldn't know the specifics, Moira replied, a touch too quickly. That would be handled by our real estate division. To High Point developers, Rebecca continued, recalling details Daniel had shared during late-night conversations in the past weeks. For a project that's converting single-family homes into luxury condominiums. Moira's smile thinned. Rebecca, I'm not sure what you're implying, but the bank's foreclosure procedures follow all legal requirements. If Mr. Parker couldn't meet his financial obligations, that's unfortunate but not the bank's responsibility. Of course not, Rebecca agreed, her voice cool. Just as it's probably a coincidence that your husband sits on the board of High Point developers. A flash of something, alarm? Irritation? Crossed Moira's perfectly made-up face before she recovered her composure. My husband has various business interests. I fail to see how that's relevant to the Parker situation or your unusual living arrangement. Rebecca closed her folder deliberately. It's just interesting, that's all. How quickly their house was sold after foreclosure. How little time they were given to catch up on payments despite Mr. Parker being in the grace period following his wife's death. I should be going, Moira said abruptly. PDA meeting to prepare for. So nice running into you, Rebecca. I do hope your situation resolves itself before your leave expires. The school board takes professional boundaries very seriously, as I'm sure Principal Washburn has mentioned. The veiled threat wasn't lost on Rebecca. She has indeed. Thank you for your concern, Moira. After Moira left, Rebecca sat back in her chair, heart beating faster than normal. The encounter had revealed something important. Moira Henderson was not merely a peripherally involved banker, but potentially directly responsible for the aggressive foreclosure that had left the Parkers homeless. Rebecca pulled out her phone and texted her brother. Michael, need a favor. Can you ask your friend in real estate about recent sales on Maple Street? Particularly 247 Maple, the Parkers' former home. Need to know purchase price, buyer details, and if anything looks unusual about the transaction. Michael's response came quickly. On it. This sounds ominous. Everything okay? Rebecca typed, just following a hunch. We'll explain later. She gathered her papers, no longer able to focus on the housing application. The conversation with Moira had unsettled her, raising questions about whether the Parkers' homelessness had been the result not just of tragic circumstances but of something more deliberate, perhaps even unethical. After checking the time, Rebecca decided to head home to check on Noah before her meeting with the housing coordinator. She found him and neighbor Julia engaged in an elaborate dinosaur battle in the living room, Noah's cough apparently forgotten in the excitement of play. Ms. Rebecca, Noah exclaimed when he saw her. Ms. Julia knows all about dinosaurs. She said T-Rex wasn't actually the biggest meat eater. Spinosaurus holds that title, Julia explained with a smile, rising from her kneeling position with a slight wince. At 72, the former science teacher still maintained an infectious enthusiasm for sharing knowledge with children. Thank you for watching him, Rebecca said gratefully. I hope he wasn't too much trouble. Trouble? This young man is a delight, Julia assured her. We had lunch, read 2 books, and have been learning about prehistoric creatures ever since. His cough seems better too. Noah nodded emphatically. Ms. Julia gave me special tea like yours, but with lemon instead of honey. It helped my throat. Thank you, Rebecca said again to Julia. I can't tell you how much your help means to us. Us? Julia noted with a knowing smile. You've become quite the family unit these past weeks. Rebecca felt a flush of warmth at the observation. It's temporary, she reminded both Julia and herself. Just until they get back on their feet. MMM. Julia hummed non-committally. Well, temporary or not, it suits you. I haven't seen you this alive since before John passed. The simple truth in the statement caught Rebecca off guard. Julia had been her neighbor for 5 years, had witnessed her descent into grief after John's death and her subsequent careful reconstruction of a solitary life. Of course, she would notice the changes these past weeks had wrought. I should get going, Julia said, gathering her sweater. Bridge club this afternoon. Will you need me to watch Noah tomorrow as well? If you wouldn't mind, Rebecca confirmed. Just for a couple of hours while I meet with the housing coordinator again. Not at all. We have a dinosaur excavation planned. Don't we, Noah? Noah nodded enthusiastically. We're going to dig for bones in the sandbox at the park. After Julia left, Rebecca prepared a light lunch for herself and Noah, her mind still turning over the conversation with Moira Henderson. If there had been something improper about the foreclosure process, would it make any difference now? The house was long sold, the Parkers' possessions auctioned off. Yet instinctively, she felt there was something important in this connection, something that might help the family in their rebuilding process. Her phone chimed with a text from Daniel. Meeting ran long but should make pickup. How's Noah? Rebecca replied, much better. No cough during play with Julia. Made new dinosaur discoveries. She hesitated, then added. Ran into Moira Henderson this morning. She's the loan officer who handled your foreclosure and on the school board. Her husband is connected to the developer who bought your house. Might be something they're worth looking into. Daniel's response didn't come for several minutes. Not sure what good it would do now. House is gone. Just trying to move forward. Rebecca understood his reluctance to revisit the painful past. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the coincidences were too neat, the connections too convenient. She typed, I understand. But if there was something improper about how quickly they foreclosed, especially during the grace period after Emma's death, you might have legal recourse. Worth at least asking questions. This time his reply came more quickly. Maybe, let's talk tonight after kids are asleep. Need to focus on work now. Thanks for looking out for us. The simple gratitude in his message warmed her. Despite the complexity of their situation, a foundation of trust had formed between them, strengthened each day by the shared care of his children, by late-night conversations after Lily and Noah were asleep, by the gradual revealing of their histories and hopes to each other. After lunch, Rebecca took Noah with her to the housing assistance meeting, the coordinator having agreed that bringing him was fine. As they drove to the county services building, Rebecca found herself studying Noah in the rearview mirror. The change in him over 3 weeks was remarkable. His hollow cheeks had filled out, the dark circles under his eyes had faded, his natural exuberance had returned. He chattered about dinosaurs and the playground at the park, his vocabulary impressive for a 4-year-old. Ms. Rebecca, he asked suddenly, shifting topics with the lightning speed of young children. Why don't you have any kids? The question, innocent but piercing, caught Rebecca off guard. Well, she began carefully. My husband and I wanted children, but he got sick before we could have any. Like my mommy got sick? Noah asked. Similar, yes, Rebecca replied, her throat tightening. He had cancer. He fought very hard, but he died 3 years ago. Noah absorbed this information with the straightforward acceptance children often show for difficult truths. That's sad, he said simply. Do you still miss him? Every day, Rebecca admitted. But it gets easier with time. I miss my mommy too, Noah confided. Sometimes I forget what she looked like, but Daddy shows me pictures. That's good, Rebecca encouraged. Pictures help us remember the people we love. Daddy says you're helping us because you're kind, Noah continued. He says not everyone would do that. Rebecca smiled, touched by Daniel's description. Your daddy is kind too, and brave. It takes courage to accept help when you need it. Noah nodded, accepting this assessment. Are we still going to live with you when we get a new house? The question revealed the confusion any child might feel about their temporary living arrangement. No, sweetie. When you get a new house, you, Lily, and your daddy will live there together. But I'll still see you. We'll still be friends. Promise? Noah asked, his dark eyes serious in the mirror. I promise, Rebecca assured him, wondering how she could possibly extricate herself from this family's life after becoming so deeply intertwined with it. Somehow, in just 3 weeks, the Parkers had filled spaces in her heart she'd thought permanently emptied by loss. The housing assistance meeting went well, with the coordinator confirming that Daniel's application looked strong. His stable employment, the children's needs, and their current temporary housing situation all worked in their favor. 2 potential apartments had been identified, both within the school district boundaries, and viewings could be arranged for the weekend. As Rebecca drove back to the apartment with Noah, her phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the display, and she answered through the car's Bluetooth system. Hey, sis. Michael's voice filled the car. Got that information you asked for. Is now a good time? As good as any, Rebecca replied, glancing at Noah, who was occupied with a dinosaur book in the back seat. What did you find out? Interesting stuff, Michael said, his tone suggesting he'd discovered something significant. The Parkers' house at 247 Maple was sold just 19 days after the formal foreclosure. That's unusually fast. Sale price was $192,000, which is about 70% of market value for that neighborhood. That does seem low, Rebecca agreed, remembering Daniel mentioning the house had been appraised at nearly $300,000 before Emma's death. Gets better, Michael continued. Buyer was High Point Developers, which is converting that entire block into luxury condominiums. They've acquired 6 properties on that street in the past year, all foreclosures, all at similar discounts. And Moira Henderson's husband sits on High Point's board, Rebecca added, pieces falling into place. Exactly, Michael confirmed. Thomas Henderson. He's not just a board member, he's a principal investor. And here's where it gets really interesting. My contact says there's been talk in real estate circles about how quickly these foreclosures are happening. One homeowner tried to contest, claiming they were still in the grace period after a family medical emergency when the bank accelerated the process. Rebecca's pulse quickened. What happened with that case? Settled out of court, Michael replied, with a non-disclosure agreement. But my guy says the settlement was substantial. Thank you, Michael, Rebecca said, mind racing with implications. This is exactly what I needed to know. Want to tell me what this is about now? Michael asked. Sounds like you're digging into something potentially messy. Rebecca glanced at Noah again, mindful of little ears. Let's just say the family I'm helping might have been foreclosed on improperly. I'm trying to determine if there's any recourse. Be careful, Becca, Michael advised. Banks have deep pockets and good lawyers. And if school board members are involved, there could be blowback on your job. I know, Rebecca acknowledged. But this family deserves justice if they were deliberately pushed into homelessness for profit. After ending the call, Rebecca drove the rest of the way in thoughtful silence, processing what she'd learned. The connections were too neat to be coincidental. Moira Henderson, the loan officer who oversaw the Parkers' suspiciously rapid foreclosure. Her husband, the investor in the development company that purchased the property at a steep discount. The pattern of similar acquisitions on the same street. The question was what to do with this information. Daniel had already expressed reluctance to revisit the painful past, focusing instead on rebuilding. Yet if they had been wronged, if legal recourse might provide resources to help their fresh start, didn't they deserve to know? At the apartment, Rebecca helped Noah with a simple art project while waiting for school dismissal time. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Got clear for pickup. We'll get Lily and bring dinner home. Chinese okay. Rebecca smiled at the domestic normalcy of the message, typing back. Chinese sounds perfect. Noah votes for extra fortune cookies. The response came with a laughing emoji. Of course he does. See you around 5. As she put her phone away, Rebecca was struck by how comfortable their routine had become. Daniel picked up Lily when his work schedule allowed, often bringing dinner on those days to contribute to the household. Evenings were spent helping Lily with homework, playing with Noah, and the 4 of them sharing meals around Rebecca's table that had rarely seen more than one place setting in the years since John's death. After dinner each night, once the children were in bed, Daniel and Rebecca would talk. Sometimes about practical matters like housing applications or school events, sometimes about deeper subjects. They'd shared stories of their respective losses, finding unexpected comfort in the understanding that came from similar experiences. They'd talked about their childhoods, their dreams before life had taken unexpected turns, their hopes for the future. In those quiet conversations, something had begun to grow between them. A connection that went beyond their temporary living arrangement, beyond his role as a parent of her student, beyond her position as his family's helper. Rebecca had found herself looking forward to those talks, to the way Daniel's initial guardedness had gradually given way to openness, to the surprising moments of laughter they sometimes shared despite the serious circumstances that had brought them together. It was dangerous territory, she knew. Lines were blurring that should perhaps remain distinct. Yet she couldn't bring herself to reinforce boundaries that seemed increasingly artificial in the face of their shared daily life. The afternoon passed quickly, with Rebecca helping Noah create a colorful drawing of dinosaurs for Lily. At 5 o'clock, the apartment door opened to Daniel's voice calling out, "Dinner delivery." Noah ran to the entryway, where Daniel set down bags of Chinese food to scoop his son into a hug. Lily followed, already chatting about her day at school as she hung up her backpack. "Ms. Peterson said my story was the best in the class," she announced proudly. "She's going to put it on the bulletin board." "That's wonderful, sweetie," Rebecca praised, helping Daniel unpack the food containers onto the kitchen counter. "I wrote about our family," Lily continued, oblivious to the way both adults stilled at her words. "About how we were sad when Mommy died, and then we lost our house. But now we have Ms. Rebecca and things are better." Daniel exchanged a glance with Rebecca, something unspoken passing between them. "That sounds like a very honest story," he said carefully to Lily. "I'd love to read it." "Ms. Peterson is sending home a copy tomorrow," Lily said, already digging through the bags for her favorite sweet and sour chicken. As they settled around the table for dinner, Rebecca observed the easy interaction between Daniel and his children, the way he knew exactly how to cut Noah's food into manageable pieces, how he remembered Lily preferred her rice separate from her sauce, how he gently reminded them both to use napkins. Despite everything they'd endured, the bond between them remained unbroken, perhaps even strengthened by adversity. "How was your day?" Daniel asked Rebecca as the children chattered to each other about dinosaurs and school projects. "Interesting," she replied. "The housing coordinator has 2 apartments for us to look at this weekend, both within the school district." Daniel nodded, his expression a mixture of gratitude and determination. "That's great news. The sooner we can get our own place, the better. Also," Rebecca continued more quietly, "I heard back from my brother about your former house." Daniel's expression shuddered slightly. "And I think we should talk about it later," Rebecca suggested, with a meaningful glance toward the children. He nodded, understanding her concern about little ears. After bedtime, the rest of the evening followed their established routine: dinner cleanup, bath time for the children, homework help for Lily, a bedtime story for Noah, and finally, the quiet that descended after both children were asleep. Rebecca made tea while Daniel checked emails on his phone at the kitchen table. In just 3 weeks, they developed a comfortable domesticity that sometimes made Rebecca forget the temporary nature of their arrangement. "So," Daniel said as she set a mug of tea in front of him, "what did your brother find out?" Rebecca took a deep breath and shared everything Michael had discovered: the accelerated foreclosure process, the below-market sale, the pattern of similar acquisitions on Maple Street, and most significantly, the connections to Moira and Thomas Henderson. Daniel listened in silence, his expression darkening as she spoke. When she finished, he stared into his tea for a long moment. "I suspected something wasn't right," he finally said. "The foreclosure seemed to happen so quickly. I kept telling them about Emma's death, about the grace period they were supposed to provide, but they pushed ahead anyway." Michael said another homeowner contested a similar foreclosure and received a substantial settlement, Rebecca told him. "There might be legal recourse." Daniel shook his head. "What good would it do now? The house is gone. Our things are gone. We're trying to move forward, not look back. It might provide resources to help you rebuild," Rebecca pointed out gently. A settlement could mean a down payment on a new house instead of an apartment, maybe even recouping some of what was lost when they auctioned your possessions. And it might mean nothing but more stress, legal fees we can't afford, and reopening wounds that are just starting to heal, Daniel countered. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Rebecca had come to recognize as a sign of inner conflict. The kids are finally feeling stable again. I have a steady job. We have housing prospects. Do I really want to drag us all through a legal battle with a bank? Rebecca understood his hesitation. It's your decision, of course. I just thought you should know what we found out. Daniel looked at her, his expression softening. I appreciate that. I do. And I'm not dismissing it entirely. It's just... He trailed off, searching for words. Overwhelming, Rebecca supplied. On top of everything else you're managing. Exactly. He reached across the table and briefly covered her hand with his. A gesture of gratitude that sent an unexpected warmth through her. Thank you for looking out for us. For caring enough to investigate. Of course, Rebecca replied, suddenly very aware of his hand on hers. He seemed to realize it at the same moment, withdrawing with a slightly embarrassed smile. I should probably turn in, he said, rising from the table. Early shift tomorrow. Of course, Rebecca repeated, gathering their mugs. I'll see you in the morning. As Daniel headed down the hallway to the spare room, Rebecca stayed in the kitchen, processing their conversation and her own conflicted feelings. The professional boundaries she'd once maintained so carefully had eroded over these weeks of shared living space, of watching Daniel rebuild his life with determination and grace, of seeing his gentle parenting despite unimaginable stress. She was still standing at the sink when Daniel reappeared in the doorway, his expression resolute. I've been thinking, he said without preamble. If there's evidence the foreclosure was handled improperly, we should at least talk to a lawyer. Not for me, but for the kids. They deserve justice for what was taken from them. Rebecca turned to face him. I agree, and I think I know someone who might help. A friend from college who specializes in predatory lending cases. I can reach out tomorrow if you'd like. Daniel nodded. Thank you. For everything. He hesitated, then added, this living arrangement, it's not what either of us expected, but I want you to know how much it means. Not just the roof over our heads, but having someone who cares what happens to us. The kids adore you, and I... He broke off, seemingly unsure how to continue. I care about all of you, Rebecca said simply, filling the silence. More than I expected to. The admission hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to address. Daniel nodded again, a small smile touching his lips. Good night, Rebecca. Good night, Daniel. After he left, Rebecca finished cleaning the kitchen, her mind turning over the day's discoveries and the decision to pursue legal advice. If the Hendersons and High Point developers had deliberately accelerated the Parkers' foreclosure for profit, they deserved to be held accountable. The question was whether the pursuit of justice would help or hinder the family's healing process. As she turned off the kitchen light and headed to her own bedroom, Rebecca acknowledged to herself that her interest in the case wasn't entirely altruistic. She'd grown deeply invested in the Parkers' well-being, not just as a teacher concerned for a student, but as someone who had come to care for this family in a personal, profound way. The realization was both comforting and unsettling. In opening her home to a family in crisis, Rebecca had also opened her heart in ways she hadn't anticipated. Whatever came next, whether legal action against the bank, a move to new housing, or the natural conclusion of their temporary arrangement, she was no longer just an observer in the Parker story. She had become an integral part of it, and they, unexpectedly but undeniably, had become part of hers. The following Saturday morning found Rebecca, Daniel, and both children touring the first of the potential apartments identified by the Housing Assistance Program. Located in a well-maintained complex about 2 miles from Oakwood Elementary, the 2-bedroom unit featured new carpet, a small balcony, and a community playground visible from the living room windows. What do you think? Rebecca asked Daniel as they stood in the master bedroom, the housing coordinator chatting with Lily and Noah in the living room. Daniel ran his hand along the freshly painted wall. It's nice. Clean. The location is good for the kids' school. His voice was measured, practical, but Rebecca detected a note of hesitation. But, she prompted gently. He sighed, looking out the window at the parking lot below. But it's not a home yet. Just walls and carpet. He turned to face her. I know that sounds ungrateful. This place is 1,000 times better than where we were a month ago. It doesn't sound ungrateful, Rebecca assured him. It sounds human. You lost your home. Not just the house, but everything that made it yours. Of course this feels empty in comparison. Daniel nodded, relief crossing his features at being understood. We'll make it work. The kids will adapt. They always do. They rejoined Lily and Noah, who were enthusiastically describing to the housing coordinator how they would arrange their shared bedroom. And my dinosaurs can go on that shelf, Noah was explaining, pointing to a built-in bookcase. And I can put my books on the top shelves where Noah can't reach them, Lily added pragmatically. The housing coordinator, Tanya Wilson, smiled at their planning. Sounds like you two have it all figured out. What do you think, Mr. Parker? Is this a contender? Daniel nodded, putting on an enthusiastic expression for his children's benefit. Definitely. Should we see the second option before making a decision? The second apartment was in an older complex but offered more space. 3 bedrooms instead of 2, allowing the children to have separate rooms. The trade-off was location, nearly 4 miles from the school, and condition. The appliances were dated, the carpet worn in high-traffic areas. The rent subsidy would be the same for either place, Tanya explained as they toured the second unit. The older complex has lower base rent, so your out-of-pocket expense would be less here, but the commute to school would be longer. Rebecca watched Daniel absorb this information, noting the careful calculations behind his eyes, financial considerations balanced against the children's needs and preferences. In the 3 weeks they'd lived together, she'd come to admire this about him. His thoughtful decision-making, always prioritizing his children despite his own hardships. What do you think, guys? Daniel asked Lily and Noah. This place has enough room for separate bedrooms. Would you like that? Lily and Noah exchanged a glance, communicating in that silent language siblings often develop. I like the other one better, Lily said finally. It's closer to school, and there was a playground, and it had the built-in bookcase for my dinosaurs, Noah added, clearly having fixated on this feature. Daniel nodded, taking their opinions seriously. Those are good points. He turned to Tanya. I think we're leaning toward the first property. When would it be available? December 1st, Tanya replied. So about 3 weeks from now. The paperwork can be processed next week if you decide to move forward. Back in the car, driving home from the viewings, Daniel was unusually quiet. The children chattered in the back seat about the apartments, their excitement evident in plans for decorating their shared room. You okay? Rebecca asked softly, glancing at him in the passenger seat. Yeah, he said, though his tone belied the word. Just processing. It's a big step. Rebecca understood the weight behind his simple statement. The apartment represented both progress and a painful reminder. Progress from homelessness, but a reminder that their former life was truly gone. The modest 2-bedroom unit was a far cry from the spacious family home they'd lost on Maple Street. I spoke with my attorney friend yesterday, she said, changing the subject. Sandra Klein. She specializes in predatory lending and foreclosure cases. Daniel's interest visibly sharpened. What did she say? She'd like to meet with you. Based on what I told her about the timeline and the Henderson connection, she thinks there might be a legitimate case for wrongful foreclosure, especially if they accelerated the process during the grace period after Emma's death. When could we meet? She offered to come to my apartment tomorrow afternoon, if that works for you. No charge for the initial consultation. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. Tomorrow would be good. I appreciate you arranging this. Of course, Rebecca replied. If there's any chance of getting some justice, some compensation for what happened to your family, it's worth exploring. When they arrived home, the children immediately wanted to share their apartment adventures with neighbor Julia, who had become a favorite honorary grandmother figure in their lives. With Daniel's permission, Rebecca took them next door, leaving him some time alone. Something she'd noticed he rarely got with two young children and shared living quarters. "Well, how was it?" Julia asked, ushering them into her apartment, which smelled deliciously of fresh-baked cookies. As the children launched into detailed descriptions of both apartments, complete with emphatic hand gestures from Noah, Rebecca found herself reflecting on the past weeks. The Parkers had been in her home for nearly a month now, and somehow, they'd formed a functioning household. Shared meals, divided chores, established routines. Daniel had found work. Noah had recovered from his illness. Lily was thriving again at school. By objective measures, the temporary arrangement was a success. The very fact that they were now touring potential apartments was evidence of progress, of the family regaining stability. So why did Rebecca feel a growing sense of unease at the prospect of their departure? "You're awfully quiet," Julia observed after the children had been distracted with cookies and milk at her kitchen table. "Just thinking," Rebecca demurred. "It's been a big day." Julia's knowing gaze saw through the deflection. "They'll be leaving soon, it seems. How do you feel about that?" The directness of the question caught Rebecca off guard. "It's the goal we've been working toward," she said carefully. "For them to re-establish independence." "That wasn't what I asked," Julia pointed out gently. Rebecca sighed, lowering her voice to ensure the children wouldn't overhear. "I'll miss them," she admitted. "More than I expected to. But it's the right progression. Daniel needs to rebuild their family life, and they need their own space." "And what about what you need?" Julia pressed. The question lingered with Rebecca even after they returned to her apartment, where they found Daniel making dinner. Another contribution to the household he insisted on, using the modest discretionary income from his new job to provide meals several times a week. "Julia send cookies back with you?" he asked, looking up from the pasta sauce he was stirring. "A whole plateful," Rebecca confirmed, setting the cookies on the counter. "She's spoiling them." "She's spoiling all of us," Daniel corrected with a small smile. "I don't know what we'll do without her homemade cookies when we move." The casual reference to their upcoming departure hung in the air between them. Rebecca busied herself setting the table, avoiding his gaze. "The kids are excited about the apartment," Daniel observed. "They've already planned where every toy will go." "Children are remarkably adaptable," Rebecca agreed. "They'll make it feel like home in no time." Daniel was quiet for a moment, focusing on the sauce. "It won't be the same," he said finally, his voice low. "After being here, after having—" He broke off, seemingly unsure how to continue. "After having what?" Rebecca prompted gently. He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "After having someone to share the load. Someone who cares about them, about us, the way you do." The honesty in his statement caught her off guard. "You'll still have that," she said carefully. "We won't disappear from each other's lives just because you move into your own place." "Won't we, though?" Daniel challenged softly. "You'll go back to teaching. I'll be working. The kids will be in school. Life will get busy. It's what happens." Before Rebecca could respond, Lily and Noah burst into the kitchen, full of energy from their sugar consumption at Julia's. "Daddy, can we have the cookies Ms. Julia gave us for dessert?" Noah asked, already eyeing the plate on the counter. "After dinner," Daniel replied, seamlessly shifting from the moment of vulnerability back to parental authority. "Go wash your hands, both of you. We're eating in 5 minutes." The interrupted conversation wasn't resumed that evening. After dinner, homework, and bedtime routines, Daniel mentioned needing to review some maintenance manuals for work and retreated to the spare room earlier than usual. Rebecca found herself alone in the living room, replaying his words and the expression on his face when he'd voiced his concerns about their future connection. He was right, of course. Once the Parkers moved out, the intensity of their daily interaction would naturally diminish. Rebecca would return to teaching, Daniel would focus on rebuilding their independent life, and the close bond they'd formed through shared living space would inevitably change. The thought left an unexpected hollowness in her chest. Somewhere along the way, in the midst of this temporary arrangement born of crisis, Rebecca had begun to rely on their presence. the children's laughter filling her once quiet rooms, Daniel's steady companionship in the evenings, the sense of purpose that came from being needed. What would fill those spaces when they were gone? Sunday afternoon arrived with a knock at the door promptly at 2 o'clock. Rebecca opened it to find Sandra Klein, her attorney friend from college, standing in the hallway. In her early 40s with curly auburn hair and sharp eyes behind stylish glasses, Sandra exuded the confident competence that had characterized her even in their undergraduate days. "Becca, it's so good to see you," Sandra greeted her warmly, stepping inside. "It's been too long." "At least 3 years," Rebecca agreed, accepting her friend's hug. "Thank you for coming on a Sunday." "For you? Of course." Sandra glanced around the apartment, noting the evidence of children. Noah's dinosaurs lined up on the coffee table, Lily's drawings magnetized to the refrigerator. "So this is the temporary household you mentioned. It seems to be working well. Better than any of us expected," Rebecca admitted, leading Sandra to the dining table where she'd set up coffee and a notepad. "Daniel should be back with the kids any minute. He took them to the park to burn off some energy before our meeting." As if on cue, the door opened, and Noah's excited voice filled the apartment. And then the squirrel ran all the way up the tree with the acorn in his mouth. Daniel appeared in the dining room doorway, a slightly apologetic smile on his face. "Sorry if we're interrupting." Someone spotted a very impressive squirrel that apparently required immediate reporting. Rebecca made introductions as Daniel settled the children with activities in the living room, a movie for Noah and a book for Lily, with strict instructions not to disturb the grown-ups unless absolutely necessary. "Thank you for meeting with us," Daniel said as he joined the women at the table. "Rebecca says you specialize in cases like ours." Sandra nodded, opening her leather portfolio. "Predatory lending and wrongful foreclosure have become unfortunately common, especially in the aftermath of medical crises. Rebecca gave me a brief overview, but I'd like to hear directly from you what happened." For the next 20 minutes, Daniel recounted the sequence of events: Emma's sudden death, the medical bills, his struggle to maintain mortgage payments while caring for the children, and finally, the accelerated foreclosure despite his requests for consideration during the grace period that should have been provided following a spouse's death. Sandra took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions about dates, communications with the bank, and specific interactions with Maura Henderson. When Daniel finished his account, she reviewed her notes thoughtfully. "Based on what you've described, and the additional information Rebecca provided about the connection between Moira Henderson, her husband, and High Point developers, I believe you have grounds for a potential wrongful foreclosure case." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "What would that involve? And realistically, what could come of it?" "We would file a complaint against First Capital Bank, alleging they violated the federal grace period requirements following a spouse's death, accelerated the foreclosure process improperly, and potentially engaged in a conflict of interest given the Henderson-High Point connection." Sandra outlined the process methodically. "In terms of outcomes, the most likely scenario would be a settlement. Banks typically prefer to avoid the publicity of a trial, especially in sympathetic cases involving a widow with young children." "What kind of settlement?" Daniel asked, his expression guarded. "It's difficult to predict exact figures, but based on similar cases I've handled, you could potentially recover the equity you had in the home at the time of foreclosure, compensation for belongings lost in the process, and possibly additional damages for emotional distress and the hardship of homelessness." Sandra paused. "In the most favorable scenario, we might be looking at enough for a substantial down payment on a new home, perhaps even one comparable to what you lost." Rebecca watched Daniel absorb this information, noting the conflicting emotions crossing his face: hope, skepticism, wariness. "And the cost?" he asked finally. "I assume legal representation for something like this isn't cheap." "I would take the case on contingency," Sandra replied. "No upfront costs to you. I'd receive a percentage of any settlement or judgment we obtain. If we don't win, you don't pay. There would be no financial risk to you," Rebecca added softly. "Just the emotional investment of revisiting a difficult time." Daniel nodded slowly. "And the timeline? How long does something like this typically take?" "These cases usually resolve within 6 to 9 months. Sandra explained. The bank will likely start with delay tactics and minimal offers, but once we demonstrate the strength of our evidence, particularly the connection to High Point and the pattern of similar foreclosures, they'll likely move toward a meaningful settlement. I'd need to testify? Talk about Emma, about what happened to us. Most likely in a deposition, yes, Sandra confirmed. But many of these cases settle before reaching a courtroom trial. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, staring at his clasped hands on the table. I need to think about it, he said finally. Not for myself, but for the kids. If there's a chance to recover something of what they lost, to secure their future more effectively. Of course, Sandra agreed. This isn't a decision to make hastily. She withdrew several documents from her portfolio. Here's information about the process, my credentials, and a client agreement if you decide to move forward. Take whatever time you need to consider. As the meeting concluded, Sandra pulled Rebecca aside while Daniel checked on the children. He's been through hell, she observed quietly. But he seems remarkably resilient. He is, Rebecca confirmed. You should have seen him a month ago, living in those woods, doing everything possible to keep his children safe and in school. I've never met anyone so determined. Sandra studied her friend's face. You care about them. A lot. I do, Rebecca admitted. They've become important to me. Just be careful, Becca, Sandra advised gently. Your heart is one of your best qualities, but it also makes you vulnerable. This arrangement was always meant to be temporary. Remember? I know, Rebecca assured her, though the reminder stirred the same hollow feeling she'd experienced the night before. After Sandra left, Rebecca found Daniel in the kitchen, preparing a snack for the children. He worked methodically, cutting apple slices and arranging them on plates with peanut butter and crackers. What do you think? She asked. About what Sandra said? Daniel continued his preparations, his back to her. I think she makes a compelling case. And the idea of potentially recovering enough for a real home, not just an apartment. He trailed off, then turned to face her. But I'm worried about what it would mean for the kids, for me to reopen all of that. We're just starting to heal, to move forward. I understand, Rebecca said. It's your decision completely. I just wanted you to have the information, the option. Daniel nodded, his expression softening. I know, and I appreciate it more than I can say. He hesitated, then added, Would you be there? If I decided to go through with it? The question, vulnerable and direct, caught Rebecca off guard. Of course, she replied without hesitation. Every step of the way if you want me to be. Something shifted in Daniel's eyes. Relief, gratitude, and perhaps something deeper that neither was quite ready to name. Thank you, he said simply. They were interrupted by Noah and Lily bounding into the kitchen, animated from their quiet time and ready for snacks and attention. The moment passed, but its significance lingered between them, another thread in the increasingly complex tapestry of their relationship. The following week brought a flurry of activity as Thanksgiving approached. Rebecca's apartment filled with the festive energy of preparation, as she and the Parkers planned a small holiday celebration. It would be their first major holiday since Emma's death, a fact that hung in the background of their cheerful planning like a bittersweet shadow. On Tuesday evening, while the children decorated paper turkeys at the dining table, Daniel caught Rebecca alone in the kitchen. I've been thinking about the legal case, he said quietly, standing close to ensure the children wouldn't overhear. I want to do it. For the kids, for Emma. It feels like the right thing even if it's difficult. Rebecca nodded, understanding the weight of his decision. I think it's the right choice too. Want me to call Sandra? Please. And I'd like to move forward before we move out, if possible. Start the process while we still have this stability. He gestured vaguely at the apartment around them, at the temporary haven they'd created together. Of course, Rebecca agreed. I'll call her tonight. Later that evening, after the children were in bed, Rebecca updated Daniel on her conversation with Sandra, who had agreed to begin the paperwork immediately. They sat at the kitchen table, mugs of tea between them, discussing the practical aspects of the coming weeks. The legal process, the apartment preparations, the approaching holiday. I spoke with my brother today, Rebecca mentioned. He and his wife want to join us for Thanksgiving dinner, if that's all right with you. They're eager to meet you and the kids properly. Of course, Daniel agreed readily. It's your home, and after everything Michael has done to help us, I'd like to thank him in person. He's looking forward to it, especially meeting Noah. Apparently he's been collecting dinosaur facts to impress him. Daniel smiled, the expression transforming his face in a way that still caught Rebecca by surprise. In the weeks since they'd moved in, his features had gradually softened from the tense, haunted look of crisis to something more relaxed, more open. He smiled more frequently now, laughed occasionally, particularly at Noah's dinosaur pronouncements or Lily's increasingly sophisticated observations. I've been thinking, he said after a comfortable silence, about the apartment. The kids are excited about it, but he hesitated. It feels like a step backward in some ways, from what we had before. Rebecca nodded, understanding his meaning. From your home on Maple Street. Yes, but also, he met her eyes directly. From what we have here, the kids have thrived these past weeks. They're happier than they've been since before Emma died. The implication hung between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Something about their current arrangement, beyond just the stability of housing, was working for the Parker family in ways that went deeper than practical considerations. Children adapt, Rebecca said carefully. They'll adjust to the apartment too. Make it home. I know they will, Daniel agreed. Children are remarkably resilient. But I worry about... He trailed off, seeming to search for the right words. About what? Rebecca prompted gently. Daniel looked down at his tea, then back at her, his expression resolute. About losing this. Not just the physical space, but what we've built here. The four of us. It's become something I didn't expect. Rebecca's heart quickened at his words, at the vulnerability in his voice. I know, she admitted. I feel it too. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his, an echo of a similar moment weeks ago, but this time with deliberate intent rather than fleeting impulse. I don't know what that means, or what's possible. Our situation is complicated, to say the least. Very complicated, Rebecca agreed, though she didn't withdraw her hand. But I do know that the thought of moving out, of going back to disconnection, feels wrong. His thumb traced a small circle on the back of her hand. The kids need you, and I... He broke off, then continued more softly. I think I might need you too. The admission hung between them, honest and unvarnished. Rebecca felt something shift inside her. A door opening to possibilities she'd carefully avoided considering. Daniel, she began, uncertain how to respond to such directness. I care about all of you, more than I can say, but there are considerations, professional boundaries, the temporary nature of our arrangement, the fact that you're still grieving Emma. All true, he acknowledged. And I'm not suggesting, I don't even know what I'm suggesting exactly, just that what we've found here feels valuable. Worth acknowledging, at least. Rebecca nodded, understanding his meaning perfectly. They were in uncharted territory, a relationship forged in crisis, deepened through shared care of his children, complicated by professional connections and recent grief. Nothing about it was simple or straightforward. One day at a time, she suggested finally. Let's get through the holidays, the apartment transition, the start of the legal case. See where things stand when life is more settled. Daniel seemed to accept this measured approach. Fair enough, he agreed, though he didn't release her hand. But I want you to know that whatever happens with housing arrangements, with the legal case, with all the practical aspects of rebuilding our lives, what you've given us goes far beyond shelter or assistance. You've given us hope again, a sense of possibility. The simple truth in his words touched Rebecca deeply. You've given me something too, she admitted quietly. After John died, I existed in a kind of suspended animation, teaching, going through the motions but not really living. These past weeks with you and the children, I felt alive again, present. Daniel's expression softened with understanding. Grief has a way of putting us in holding patterns, doesn't it? Waiting for something that's never coming back. Yes, Rebecca agreed, recognizing the shared experience that had formed an unspoken bond between them from the beginning. But maybe it also prepares us to recognize what matters when we find it again. The moment between them stretched, laden with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Daniel gently squeezed her hand before releasing it. We should probably get some rest. Tomorrow's a busy day. Yes, Rebecca agreed, gathering their mugs and rising from the table. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Rebecca. As she prepared for bed that night, Rebecca found herself reflecting on their conversation, on the subtle shift it represented in their relationship. They had acknowledged something that had been growing between them for weeks, a connection that transcended their temporary living arrangement, that hinted at possibilities neither had anticipated when Lily Parker first hid her lunch in her purple backpack. Whatever came next, the apartment, the legal case against the bank, the inevitable complexities of their intertwined lives, they had crossed a threshold. The recognition of their deepening bond, spoken aloud at last, had changed something fundamental between them. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. And for the first time in 3 years, Rebecca fell asleep looking forward not just to tomorrow, but to all the uncertain, promising tomorrows that might follow. The Thanksgiving turkey, a modest bird but perfectly cooked, sat at the center of Rebecca's dining table, surrounded by traditional side dishes arranged on her grandmother's china. The table had been extended with a borrowed leaf to accommodate their expanded gathering. Rebecca, Daniel, the children, Michael and his wife Kate, and neighbor Julia, who had insisted on bringing her famous pecan pie. I think that's everything, Rebecca announced, placing the final dish of cranberry sauce on the crowded table. Shall we sit? The adults took their places while Lily helped Noah into his booster seat, exhibiting the natural caregiving that had become her habit during their months of hardship. Rebecca couldn't help but notice how much both children had changed in the 5 weeks since they'd come into her life. Their hollow cheeks filled out, dark circles gone from beneath their eyes, laughter coming more readily now. This looks amazing, Michael said appreciatively, surveying the spread. At 42, he shared Rebecca's dark hair and thoughtful eyes, though his weathered face reflected his outdoor profession as a contractor. Hard to believe you pulled this together on short notice, Becca. I had help, Rebecca replied, smiling at Daniel across the table. Daniel made the stuffing and green bean casserole, and Lily is responsible for the perfectly arranged relish tray. Lily beamed at the recognition. I made patterns with the pickles and olives. Very artistic, Kate praised. Petite with auburn hair and a warm smile, she'd immediately connected with the children upon arrival, producing small gifts that had cemented their approval. A pack of colored pencils for Lily, and, to Noah's delight, a plush stegosaurus to join his growing dinosaur collection. Before we eat, Daniel said, his voice quiet but carrying the natural authority of parenthood. In our family, we usually go around the table and share something we're thankful for, if that's all right with everyone. A lovely tradition, Julia approved. Why don't you start, Daniel? He nodded, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. Rebecca watched him, noting how different he looked from the desperate father she discovered in the woods 6 weeks ago. His face had filled out, the haunted look in his eyes replaced by something calmer, more present. The hospital job had provided not just income but a sense of purpose, of forward momentum after months of freefall. I'm thankful, Daniel began carefully, for second chances, for kindness when we needed it most. His gaze moved briefly to Rebecca before continuing around the table. For my children's resilience and strength, and for new friends who have become like family. The simple sincerity in his words created a moment of collective warmth around the table. Noah, not fully understanding the ritual but eager to participate, spoke up next. I'm thankful for T-Rex and my new dinosaurs and not being sick anymore and Ms. Rebecca's special pancakes with the faces on them. His breathless list drew chuckles from the adults. Lily's turn came next, her expression serious as she considered her answer. I'm thankful that we're not in the woods anymore, she said simply. And that Daddy smiles more now. And that we get to live with Ms. Rebecca, who makes everything better. Rebecca felt her throat tighten at the child's assessment. The others continued around the table. Michael thankful for family and good health, Kate for their growing circle of connections, Julia for the joy of new young voices in the apartment building after years of quietude. When Rebecca's turn came, she found herself momentarily speechless, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought them all to this table. I'm thankful, she began finally, for purple backpacks and curious hearts. She smiled at Lily, who returned it with understanding beyond her years. For the reminder that family comes in many forms, and for the ways loss can sometimes, eventually, lead us to new beginnings. She met Daniel's gaze across the table, a silent acknowledgement passing between them of all that remained unspoken. The gradual shift in their relationship, the uncertainty of what came next, the shared understanding of grief and healing that had connected them from the start. The meal proceeded with the comfortable flow of newly forming traditions. Rebecca observed the easy interaction between Michael and Daniel, who had bonded over shared knowledge of construction and home repair. Julia entertained the children with stories of her teaching days, while Kate asked thoughtful questions about Lily's school projects. It felt, Rebecca realized with a start, like a family gathering. Not the awkward assemblage of strangers she might have expected given the circumstances of their connection, but a genuine coming together of people who cared for one another. As the meal wound down, with adults lingering over coffee and children growing restless for dessert, Rebecca's phone rang. She excused herself to answer it, surprised to see Sandra's name on the display. Sandra? It's Thanksgiving. Why are you working? This couldn't wait, Sandra replied, her voice tight with controlled excitement. I just received an email from First Capital Bank's legal team. They want to discuss settlement options already. Rebecca moved further into the kitchen, lowering her voice. But we just filed the paperwork last week. That's unusually fast, isn't it? Lightning fast, Sandra confirmed. Which tells me they're worried. Very worried. I think our connection of the dots between Moira Henderson, her husband, and High Point developers struck a nerve. They know how bad this could look if it goes public. What does this mean for Daniel's case? It means we're in a much stronger position than I initially thought. They're scared, and scared banks settle generously. The satisfaction in Sandra's voice was evident. I need to meet with Daniel as soon as possible to discuss our strategy. How's tomorrow? It's the day after Thanksgiving, Rebecca protested. Exactly. Their legal team reached out today, on a holiday. They're not waiting, and neither should we. After arranging a meeting time, Rebecca returned to the dining room to find dessert being served, Julia's pecan pie alongside the pumpkin pie Rebecca had baked the day before, with vanilla ice cream for the children. She caught Daniel's questioning look and gave a slight nod, indicating they would talk later. The rest of the afternoon passed pleasantly, with Michael sharing embarrassing stories from their childhood that made Rebecca groan and the children giggle. Kate and Julia cleaned up despite Rebecca's protests, insisting the hostess should relax, while Daniel and Michael discussed the potential apartments Daniel had toured. The two-bedroom is nice, Michael acknowledged after hearing Daniel's description. But with 2 growing kids, you might want to consider the extra space in the 3-bedroom, even with the longer commute. It's not just the commute, Daniel admitted. The monthly cost difference is significant on my current salary. The housing subsidy helps, but it's still tight. Michael nodded thoughtfully. Have you considered a roommate situation? Someone to share costs for a while until you're more established? The question hung in the air, its broader implications clear to Rebecca even if Michael hadn't intended them. Daniel's gaze flickered briefly to her before he answered carefully. We've been fortunate with our current arrangement, but I wouldn't want to impose on anyone else's space long term. The kids need stability, their own home. Understandable, Michael agreed. Well, if you need help with the move, whenever and wherever it happens, I've got a truck and strong back. I appreciate that, Daniel said sincerely. By early evening, the gathering began to disperse. Julia returning to her apartment with promises to see the children tomorrow, Michael and Kate departing with hugs and leftovers. Once the children were occupied with a movie in the living room, Rebecca pulled Daniel into the kitchen to share Sandra's news. "Already?" Daniel asked, surprise evident in his voice. "We just filed the paperwork. Sandra thinks it's because of the Henderson connection. They're worried about the optics, about potential publicity." Rebecca leaned against the counter, studying his reaction. "She says it puts you in a very strong position." Daniel absorbed this, running a hand through his hair in the gesture Rebecca had come to recognize as a sign of processing complex emotions. What does strong position potentially mean in practical terms? She wouldn't specify over the phone, but the implication was significant compensation. Possibly enough for what? Daniel prompted when she trailed off. "For a house," Rebecca finished. "Not just an apartment. Something permanent, something the children could grow up in." The possibility lingered between them, a resolution more complete than either had dared hope for when they decided to pursue legal action. "I don't want to get ahead of ourselves," Daniel cautioned, though a new light had entered his eyes. "But if that's true, if there's even a chance, it would change everything," Rebecca agreed softly. "Not everything," Daniel corrected, his gaze holding hers. "Some things have already changed in ways that have nothing to do with housing or legal settlements." The directness of his statement created a moment of suspended animation between them, an acknowledgement of the unresolved question of what their relationship might become once the practical aspects of the Parkers' crisis were addressed. A crash from the living room broke the moment, followed by Noah's wail and Lily's immediate, "It wasn't my fault." Daniel sighed, a half-smile touching his lips. Parenthood calls. Together they went to investigate, finding Noah tearful over a toppled block tower and Lily defensive about her role in its destruction. The familiar rhythm of conflict resolution. Comfort for Noah, gentle correction for Lily, restoration of harmony, occupied them for the next several minutes. By the time both children were settled back with their movie, the intimate moment in the kitchen had passed, but its significance lingered in shared glances and the careful way they moved around each other for the rest of the evening. Sandra Klein's office occupied the second floor of a converted Victorian house in downtown Mapleton, tastefully furnished with antiques that complemented the building's architecture. It projected exactly the image Sandra had always cultivated, traditional in appearance but progressive in practice. Rebecca sat beside Daniel in front of Sandra's desk the Friday after Thanksgiving, the children having been left in Julia's care for what promised to be a pivotal meeting. "First, I want to thank you for coming in on a holiday weekend," Sandra began, elegant in a charcoal pantsuit despite the informal timing. "The bank's eagerness to discuss settlement creates a strategic advantage we should capitalize on immediately." "What exactly have they proposed?" Daniel asked, his posture betraying tension despite his calm voice. "They haven't made a specific offer yet," Sandra explained. "Just open the door to negotiations, which is telling in itself. Based on my experience, when a bank moves this quickly, they're motivated by serious concerns about potential fallout." She opened a folder on her desk, reviewing notes. "I've compiled evidence that goes beyond your individual case, Mr. Parker. There appears to be a pattern involving at least 5 other properties on Maple Street, all foreclosures accelerated during federally protected grace periods, all purchased by High Point developers at below market rates, all connected to loans Maura Henderson personally oversaw." "That sounds like..." Daniel hesitated. "Fraud," Sandra supplied flatly. "Potentially criminal fraud. The connection between Mrs. Henderson's position at the bank and her husband's investment in High Point creates a clear conflict of interest. If she accelerated foreclosures to benefit his business ventures, that's actionable on multiple fronts." Rebecca watched Daniel absorb this information, noting the complex emotions crossing his face. Vindication that his sense of wrong had been justified, anger at the calculated nature of what had happened to his family, uncertainty about pursuing what might become a high-profile case. "What's your recommendation?" he asked finally. Sandra leaned forward slightly. "Ordinarily, I'd suggest we gather more evidence before engaging in settlement discussions. However, their unusual haste suggests vulnerability they're eager to address quickly and quietly." I recommend we respond with a strongly worded settlement proposal that outlines the scope of our evidence and the breadth of damages we're prepared to seek." "How broad are we talking?" Daniel asked. "I believe we should seek compensation for the full market value of your home at the time of foreclosure, minus the remaining mortgage balance. Additionally, compensation for the auction possessions, emotional distress damages for you and the children, and punitive damages related to the improper acceleration of the foreclosure process." Sandra's expression was coolly professional. "In total, potentially approaching $500,000. The figure hung in the air like an impossible vision. Rebecca saw Daniel's hands tighten on the armrests of his chair, his expression stunned. "That's—" he began, then stopped, seemingly unable to process the possibility. "It's ambitious," Sandra acknowledged, "but not unreasonable given the circumstances and the potential for broader legal and publicity issues if this goes to trial. Banks have deep pockets, and more importantly, they have reputations to protect. If there's evidence of systematic wrongdoing involving a senior loan officer and her husband's development company, they'll pay a premium to keep it quiet." "What would be the timeline?" Rebecca asked, seeing that Daniel needed a moment to recover. "If they're as motivated as their holiday outreach suggests, we could be looking at weeks rather than months," Sandra replied. "Particularly if they want to resolve this before any public filing might draw attention to other potentially problematic foreclosures." Daniel finally found his voice. "And if we pursue this, what would be required of me? Of my family?" "Initially, very little beyond providing any additional documentation I might need. If settlement discussions progress favorably, you'll need to review and approve terms. In the unlikely event we end up in litigation, you would need to give deposition testimony." Sandra's expression softened slightly. "I understand your concern about the children. They would be protected from any direct involvement regardless of how this proceeds." Daniel nodded, his expression clearing somewhat. "I appreciate that. Their well-being has to be my priority in all of this." "Of course," Sandra agreed. "And I believe securing their financial future through appropriate compensation for what your family endured serves that priority well." After discussing additional details and signing updated agreements, Daniel and Rebecca left Sandra's office with a tentative timeline for next steps and the dizzying possibility of a resolution far beyond what they'd initially hoped for. In the car, Daniel sat silently for several minutes, staring out the window at the late November landscape. Bare trees silhouetted against a steel-gray sky, holiday decorations beginning to appear in storefronts. "Are you okay?" Rebecca asked gently. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "The amount Sandra mentioned, it seems unreal. After months of having nothing, of wondering how we'd ever rebuild." He trailed off, shaking his head slightly. "If this actually happens, it changes everything." "In good ways," Rebecca pointed out. "Security for the children. A permanent home." "Yes," Daniel agreed. "All the practical things we've been working toward." He turned to look at her directly. "But it also changes the timeline we've been operating under. The temporary nature of our arrangement was based on necessity, on practical limitations. If those limitations suddenly disappear, the implication hung between them that the gradual pace they'd tacitly agreed to for exploring their personal connection had been premised on practical constraints that might soon evaporate. "One step at a time," Rebecca suggested, echoing their previous conversation. "Let's see what happens with the settlement before we recalibrate any other plans." Daniel nodded, though something in his expression suggested the careful balance they'd maintained was shifting beneath them, future possibilities accelerating toward the present with unexpected speed. The first week of December brought a flurry of developments that left Rebecca feeling as though she were living in fast forward. Sandra called almost daily with updates on settlement negotiations, reporting that First Capital Bank had responded to their initial proposal with surprising receptiveness. Concurrently, the Housing Assistance Program confirmed the Parkers' approval for the two-bedroom apartment they'd selected, with a move-in date of December 15th, just 2 weeks away. Meanwhile, the apartment itself had begun a subtle transformation in preparation for the Christmas holiday. A small tree stood in the corner of the living room, decorated with a mix of Rebecca's traditional ornaments and handmade creations from Lily and Noah. Paper snowflakes hung in the windows, stockings were arranged on the bookshelf, no fireplace being available, and the scent of holiday baking frequently filled the kitchen. On a Wednesday evening, with the children finally asleep after the excitement of making Christmas cookies, Rebecca and Daniel sat at the kitchen table reviewing the latest communication from Sandra. They've counteroffered at $375,000. Daniel read from the email, disbelief evident in his voice. Sandra believes we can push for $425,000 and likely settle around $400,000. That's incredible, Rebecca said softly. What would that mean for you, practically speaking? Daniel set the paper down, running a hand through his hair. It means after paying Sandra's percentage, I could purchase a modest house outright. No mortgage. Set aside college funds for the kids. Have a genuine emergency fund. He shook his head slightly. Everything we lost, essentially restored. Justice, Rebecca observed. Of a sort. Yes, Daniel agreed. Though nothing can restore the months of homelessness, the trauma the children experienced. He was quiet for a moment. Or bring Emma back. Rebecca reached across the table to cover his hand with hers, a gesture that had become natural between them in recent weeks. No, but it can secure their future. And yours. Our future, Daniel corrected quietly, turning his hand to clasp hers. Whatever form that takes. The directness in his gaze made Rebecca's heart quicken. They'd been dancing around this conversation since Thanksgiving, acknowledging the connection between them while carefully avoiding definite statements about what might come next. Daniel, she began carefully, there's a lot happening very quickly. The settlement, the apartment, your whole life changing again in the span of weeks. It might be wise to let things settle before making any decisions about personal matters. You think I don't know my own mind? He asked, not accusatory but genuinely curious. I think grief and gratitude can sometimes get confused, Rebecca replied gently, and I would never want to be something you felt obligated to. Stop, Daniel interrupted, his voice firm but kind. That's not what this is. I know the difference between gratitude and... He hesitated, then continued with careful precision. And deeper feelings. I've had months of crisis to clarify what matters to me, what I value, who I am without the external trappings of success or stability. Rebecca nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words. Crisis had a way of stripping life to its essentials, revealing core values and priorities with stark clarity. These past weeks with you, Daniel continued, watching you with my children, sharing this space, these late-night conversations, they've shown me something I wasn't looking for but recognize now that I've found it. He met her gaze directly. A possibility. A connection I didn't expect to find again after Emma died. The honesty in his words touched something deep within Rebecca. A recognition of the same unexpected discovery in her own heart. The gradual awakening of feelings she'd believed permanently dormant after John's death. I feel it too, she admitted quietly. But there are complications. My return to teaching in January. Your new home. The children's adjustment to all these changes. All true, Daniel acknowledged. And I'm not suggesting we ignore those practical considerations. Just that we acknowledge what's growing between us as something worth exploring, worth making space for amid all the other changes. Rebecca considered his words, feeling the weight of possibility in them. After John died, she'd carefully reconstructed a life that was manageable if not particularly joyful. Teaching, maintaining her home, occasional social engagements with close friends. The Parkers' arrival had disrupted that carefully balanced existence, introducing chaos initially, but eventually something much more valuable. Connection, purpose, joy. What would that look like? She asked finally. Practically speaking. A small smile touched Daniel's lips at her persistent practicality. I don't know exactly. We'd figure it out together. The children and I would move to the apartment as planned. They need that stability, that sense of our family regaining independence. You'd return to teaching. We'd date like normal people. Dinner, movies, talks without children interrupting every 5 minutes. The vision he painted was both ordinary and extraordinary. the conventional beginnings of a relationship made remarkable by the unconventional circumstances that had brought them together. And the children? Rebecca asked, their well-being never far from her thoughts. Would continue to have you in their lives, however this develops, Daniel assured her. They love you, Rebecca. That's a reality separate from whatever happens between you and me. The certainty in his voice steadied her, addressing one of her deepest concerns, that exploring a romantic relationship with Daniel might somehow jeopardize the bonds she'd formed with Lily and Noah. Before she could respond, her phone rang, Sandra's name appearing on the display at nearly 9 in the evening. Sandra? Is everything okay? Rebecca answered, concern evident in her voice. Better than okay, Sandra replied, excitement breaking through her usual professional tone. They've accepted our counterproposal. $425,000. Rebecca. They've agreed to the full amount. Rebecca's free hand covered her mouth, eyes widening as she looked at Daniel. Sandra, I'm putting you on speaker. Daniel is here with me. As Sandra repeated the news, Daniel's expression transformed, shock giving way to disbelief, then a dawning joy unlike anything Rebecca had seen on his face before. How soon? He managed to ask. When would this actually happen? The bank wants this resolved before the end of the year, Sandra explained. We're looking at final paperwork next week. Funds potentially disbursed before Christmas. The satisfaction in her voice was evident. Apparently, their concern about potential publicity has only increased. Our evidence connecting the Henderson foreclosures to High Point was apparently quite convincing. After arranging to meet the following day to review settlement documents, they ended the call. A profound silence filled the kitchen as Daniel and Rebecca absorbed the magnitude of the news. It's really happening, Daniel said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Everything we lost, restored. A future for the kids that I couldn't have imagined 6 weeks ago. You deserve this, Rebecca told him firmly. All of you do. It's justice, not charity or luck. Daniel nodded, emotions playing across his face too complex for simple categorization. I wish Emma could see this. Know that the children will be okay. She knows, Rebecca said softly, the certainty in her voice surprising even herself. Somehow she knows. Daniel's eyes glistened with unshed tears. He stood abruptly, moving to the window that overlooked the parking lot, his back to Rebecca as he composed himself. She remained seated, giving him the space to process emotions too private to share fully, even with her. When he turned back, his expression had cleared, resolve replacing vulnerability. This changes our plans. With this settlement, we don't need the subsidized apartment. We can look for a house, something permanent, something the children can grow up in. Rebecca nodded, seeing the practical implications immediately. That makes sense. Though finding and purchasing a house will take time, probably months. Yes, Daniel agreed. Which brings me back to our previous conversation. He returned to the table, sitting closer to her this time. Rebecca, I'm not asking for promises or commitments, just openness to possibilities, to seeing where this connection between us might lead, with the practical pressures removed. Put that way, with clarity and without pressure, Rebecca found her hesitation dissolving. The careful boundaries she constructed around her heart after John's death had already been breached by this family. By Lily's courage, Noah's resilience, Daniel's quiet strength. Whatever came next between them, that reality couldn't be undone. I'd like that, she said simply, to explore possibilities. Together. The relief and joy that crossed Daniel's face made her heart tighten with a familiar ache. Not the pain of grief this time, but the sweet discomfort of opening herself to vulnerability again, to the risk and reward of caring deeply. He leaned forward, hesitating briefly before closing the distance between them. The kiss was gentle, tentative, a question as much as an affirmation. Rebecca answered by returning it, allowing herself to acknowledge the feelings that had been building within her for weeks. When they separated, Daniel's smile held a wonder that made him look younger, unburdened. That was overdue, Rebecca supplied with a small laugh, surprising herself with her boldness. Daniel's laugh joined hers, the sound warming the kitchen that had witnessed so many serious conversations between them. Definitively overdue, he agreed. A small noise from the hallway interrupted the moment. They turned to find Lily standing in the doorway in her pajamas, eyes wide with surprise and something else. Recognition, perhaps. "Lily," Daniel said, recovering first. "What are you doing up, sweetie? It's late." "I had a dream about Mommy," Lily said, her voice small. "She was in our old house on Maple Street, but she wasn't sad. She was smiling." Daniel exchanged a glance with Rebecca before moving to kneel before his daughter. "That sounds like a nice dream." Lily nodded solemnly. "She showed me pictures on the wall, but they weren't our old pictures. They were new ones, with us in a different house." Her gaze moved to Rebecca, then back to her father. "You were both in the pictures. And Noah. And there was a dog." The innocent observation, delivered with a child's straightforward acceptance, created a moment of stunned silence between the adults. Daniel recovered first, drawing Lily into a gentle hug. "Dreams can be very special," he told her. "Especially dreams about people we miss." "She wasn't sad, Daddy?" Lily repeated, seeming to need him to understand this point. "She was happy." "I'm glad," Daniel said softly, his voice rough with emotion. "Now let's get you back to bed. It's very late." As he led Lily back to the bedroom, Rebecca remained at the kitchen table, struck by the timing of the child's dream and the uncanny prescience of its content. She wasn't particularly superstitious or inclined toward mystical interpretations, but something about Lily's matter-of-fact description resonated with a deeper truth, that healing was possible, that new beginnings could coexist with honoring what came before. When Daniel returned several minutes later, his expression was thoughtful. "She went right back to sleep. Said she wasn't scared, just needed to tell me about the dream." "It's remarkable timing," Rebecca observed. "Children have an intuition about things sometimes," Daniel said, settling beside her again. "Lily especially. She's always been sensitive to undercurrents, to things unsaid." She seemed very accepting. "Of what she saw here, I mean," Daniel nodded. "She's been dropping hints for weeks. Little comments about how we're like a family now, questions about why we can't just stay here forever." He smiled slightly. "Children cut to the heart of things sometimes, don't they?" "They do," Rebecca agreed. "And they adapt to new realities with a flexibility adults often lack." Daniel reached for her hand again, his expression growing serious. "Whatever comes next for us, the children's well-being has to remain the priority. They've been through so much change already." "Absolutely," Rebecca agreed immediately. "Stability for them comes first. Everything else unfolds at whatever pace makes sense for them, for all of us." The understanding between them was both simple and profound, an acknowledgement that their connection, however promising, existed within the context of a family healing from significant trauma. That healing couldn't be rushed, nor could the careful integration of new relationships into lives still reconstructing themselves after loss. "One day at a time," Daniel suggested, echoing their earlier conversation, "with openness to possibilities." "I like that approach," Rebecca agreed, feeling a sense of rightness settle over her. A certainty that whatever came next, they would navigate it together with the same careful attention to each other's needs that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. 6 months later, on a perfect June day, Rebecca stood in the driveway of a colonial-style house on Oak Lane, watching as Daniel and Michael carried the last of the moving boxes from the truck to the front door. Lily supervised the placement of her carefully labeled belongings, while Noah chased their newly adopted golden retriever puppy, aptly named Rex, around the freshly mowed lawn. The settlement money had arrived 3 days before Christmas, transforming possibilities into realities with dizzying speed. Despite the sudden financial security, Daniel had opted for careful planning, continuing his hospital job, purchasing a modest but comfortable 4-bedroom home in a good school district, setting aside significant funds for the children's education. The Parkers had moved temporarily into the subsidized apartment as planned, maintaining the careful progression toward independence that Daniel felt was important for the children's sense of security. Rebecca had returned to teaching in January, Lily remaining in Ms. Peterson's class to maintain appropriate boundaries. Their relationship had developed gradually over those months. Dinner dates when Julia watched the children, weekend outings to museums and parks, quiet evenings talking after the children were asleep. The careful pace had allowed trust to deepen, connections to strengthen, and healing to continue for all of them. "That's the last of it," Daniel announced, joining Rebecca in the driveway, sweat glistening on his forehead from the exertion of moving in June heat. "Everything's inside, ready for the great unpacking." "It's really happening," Rebecca observed, taking in the scene before them. The children playing, the house with its welcoming front porch, the newly planted flower beds that Lily had helped design. "Your new home. Our new chapter," Daniel corrected gently, slipping an arm around her waist. The gesture still gave Rebecca a small thrill of happiness, a sense of rightness she'd never expected to find again after losing John. The past 6 months had transformed all of them. Daniel had grown more confident, the haunted look completely gone from his eyes now, replaced by a steady peace and occasional moments of genuine joy. The children had blossomed, Lily excelling in school and developing a passion for art, Noah overcoming the last lingering effects of his illness to become a boisterous, dinosaur-obsessed 5-year-old. And Rebecca had changed too, emerging from the careful shell she'd constructed after John's death into a fuller version of herself. Still a dedicated teacher, but now also a woman who had opened her heart to new possibilities, to the messy, complicated joy of connecting with a family finding its way back to wholeness. "Ms. Rebecca," Noah called, running toward her with Rex bounding at his heels. "Can we get the dinosaur decorations for my room now? Please." "After lunch," she promised, ruffling his hair affectionately. "We need to feed everyone first. Then we can start making the house feel like home." "It already feels like home," Lily declared, joining them with the confidence of her 8 years. "Because we're all here together." The simple wisdom in her statement touched Rebecca deeply. Home wasn't the physical structure, however lovely the new house might be. It was the connections between them, the bonds formed through crisis and strengthened through choice. As they headed inside for lunch, Rebecca paused in the doorway, taking a moment to absorb the significance of the threshold she was crossing. Not just into a new house, but into a future she hadn't imagined possible 6 months ago when she'd followed a small girl with a purple backpack into the woods behind Oakwood Elementary. That day, she'd made a call that saved a child's life. What she hadn't realized then was that in saving Noah Parker, she'd also set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately save them all. Daniel from the crushing weight of trying to parent alone in impossible circumstances, Lily from the burden of responsibilities no child should bear, and Rebecca herself from the half-life she'd been living since John's death. "Coming?" Daniel asked, holding out his hand to her from inside the house. Rebecca smiled, taking his hand and stepping across the threshold. "Yes," she said simply. "I'm coming home." Behind the house, in the wooded backyard that had partly sold Daniel on the property, birds called to each other in the summer afternoon. Life continuing, adapting, finding new patterns, just as they had done, just as they would continue to do together.